Chapter 603. I'll leave the accounts to you. The two censors cupped their hands in obeisance to the three young men in front of them and said with a smile. Behind them, more than 10 palace guards stood solemnly. The three young men were dressed like scholars and had folding fans tied around their waists. They looked high-spirited, but there was a square object hanging on the other side which looked a bit strange. You two are too polite. This is what we should be doing. Cui Shixin smiled and cupped his hands together. One of the censors smiled and said, Time is of the essence. Let's talk as we go. Please. Cui Shixin extended his hand. They were ordered by the emperor to investigate the accounts. Cui Shixin and the others were divided into 4 groups of 3. At this time, the 3 of them were going to a county in the suburbs near the capital. Although there were 2 imperial censors in charge of this trip, the status of these 3 people was not ordinary. The 2 imperial censors did not dare to put on airs. Moreover, the deputy prime minister had already instructed them to show sufficient respect to the students of the Calculation Academy. Qin County was a small county less than 50 miles away from the capital. It was neither too close nor too far away. Although it wasn't as rich as Jing County, it was still near the capital. It wasn't rich, but it wasn't poor either. At this time, in the government office of Qin County, the county magistrate was pacing back and forth in the hall. His face showed a hint of anxiety. After a while, he raised his head and asked, Are they coming today? A middle-aged man with a mustache walked out and said, Sir, according to the news from the capital, the investigation this time will start from a few counties in the suburbs near the capital. Qin County will be the first to bear the brunt. There should be people arriving today. County Magistrate Zhao looked up at him and asked, Advisor Ma, do you think this time is safe? Advisor Ma smiled and said, Sir, don't worry. That person is an expert in accounting. He does things flawlessly. Even the emperor can't find anything wrong with the account books in his hands. Advisor Ma looked at him and asked, Sir, did you forget that there were also censors who came to investigate the accounts before the new year? They stayed in the household for 3 days, but in the end they found nothing. Hearing this, County Magistrate Zhao was finally relieved and said, That's true. Those useless imperial censors are far from being able to investigate our accounts. As soon as he finished speaking, a yamen runner came forward to report that the useless imperial censor of the capital had arrived. Please, sirs. I've been waiting for you for a long time. County Magistrate Zhao greeted them with a smile and cupped his hands. Even though his rank was higher than these 2 censors, they came from above, so he naturally had to be courteous. One of the imperial censors said, We have come to Qin County on the orders of His Majesty to examine the accounts of the yamen. Please cooperate, County Magistrate Zhao. Of course I'll cooperate. County Magistrate Zhao smiled and said, A few days ago an imperial censor came to investigate, but since it is the order of His Majesty, we naturally have to fulfill our duties. 2 sirs, please follow me. When County Magistrate Zhao led the 2 censors to the house, he looked back at the 3 young men behind him and asked in confusion, These 3 are. He's a student who came along to audit the accounts. One of the imperial censors explained. County Magistrate Zhao nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He just felt that these 3 people were strange no matter how he looked at them, and a faint sense of foreboding arose in his heart. All the accounts of last year are here. County Magistrate Zhao brought them to the house and pointed at several thick books on the table. He sneered in his heart. These things looked big and it was impossible to finish reading them in a short time. Cui Shixin put down the abacus and said, County Magistrate Zhao, please prepare some writing brushes, ink, paper, and ink stone. Okay. County Magistrate Zhao responded and said, Advisor Ma, did you hear that? Hurry up and prepare. Writing brushes, ink, paper, and ink stone were all prepared. According to the rules, as a county magistrate, he had to avoid arousing suspicion. County Magistrate Zhao said with a smile, You guys take your time to check, I'll leave first. When he walked out of the door, he saw that the 3 strange people had already spread out the white paper. They were fiddling with a square object pierced with beads and writing something on the paper. The corner of his mouth twitched and he strode out. Walking to the yard, he glanced at the 2 rows of imperial guards outside the door and ordered the advisor, You guys have worked hard on the audit. Advisor, go to Spring Fragrance Restaurant and order a table of good wine and food. Ask them to send it over at mealtime. In the house, hearing the crackling sound, the 2 censors looked at each other, picked up their teacups and took a sip. They walked over to have a look and then came back to have a sip of tea. This was truly an easy mission. 23 RD of July by 5 cut rice paper. Cui Shixin glanced at the account book in his hand and opened another one. After comparing, he sneered and said, 100 taels. 5 cut rice paper for 100 taels. Is the rice paper of County Magistrate Zhao's family made of silver? He picked up the brush and wrote a few words on the paper. A young man opposite him also moved and said with a smile, there are some here too. The difference between the loans is too big. It's too naive to think that such a clumsy method can fool us. The two censors were stunned for a moment and then immediately put down their teacups. So fast? I also found 2 here. The last young man smiled and said, hurry up and work and you can go back earlier. I'll treat you to dinner at Drunken Moon Restaurant tonight. That's great. The two of them laughed and the crackling sounds of their hands became even louder. County Magistrate Zhao sat in the back hall for 2 hours. He couldn't get rid of the bad feeling in his heart. In annoyance he walked to the front hall. Just as he stepped out of the door, he saw the 2 censors and the 3 young men coming out of the house. He was stunned for a moment and then immediately greeted them with a smile. He couldn't even finish reading half of the account book in 2 hours. So, the checking of the account books was actually just a formality? It seemed that he had worried for nothing. The smile on his face was even brighter. He walked forward and said, you must be tired from checking the account books. I've just asked people to prepare a banquet. You might as well eat before you leave. Otherwise it will be my negligence. The censor looked at him coldly and said, arrest him. While County Magistrate Zhao was stunned, the 2 imperial guards had already pressed his shoulders. County Magistrate Zhao immediately shouted, what are you doing? What are we doing? The censor sneered and threw a few pieces of paper on his face. He said, Zhao Bin, in 1 year 7,000 taels of silver have been embezzled by you. Hearing this, County Magistrate Zhao's body shook violently. When his eyes swept over the papers on the ground, his expression was extremely frightened and then immediately turned pale. Thank you 3 for today. A censor cupped his hands to Cui Shixin and the other 2 and said, when we return to the capital, we will definitely ask for your merit in front of His Majesty. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. Cui Shixin smiled and cupped his hands. A trace of a smile also appeared on the faces of the 2 behind him. That Li really didn't have any conspiracy and gave them such a great merit for nothing. Could it be that he was showing goodwill to them and His Highness, the King of Shu? Dream on. Fong was really possessed. He thought that he could throw mountains of gold and silver at him one by one just because he had mastered the method of turning sand into colored glass. He didn't know that the rarer something was, the less valuable it was. If there were too many of them, they wouldn't be valuable anymore. He could only take advantage of the beginning to make a huge profit. Mercilessly smashed Fong's dream. When he turned around, he saw the proud Lolita sitting at the door and looking at him. Li walked over and looked at her. He asked, why do you keep looking at me these days? How do you know that I'm looking at you if you don't look at me? The proud Lolita glanced at him and hummed a little tune, leaving him with an extremely cool back view. Li stared blankly in a certain direction until her figure disappeared. Then he slowly withdrew his gaze. Could it be that the age of 12 was the dividing line between a Lolita and a young girl? The proud Lolita who had just turned 12 seemed to be becoming more and more feminine. Chapter 604. The county magistrate of Qin County had embezzled nearly 10,000 taels of silver in 1 year. He was caught red-handed by the imperial guards and escorted to the capital, Wang County. One of the imperial censors cupped his hands in salute to the county magistrate and smiled. Magistrate Cui is an honest and upright official. You are truly a role model for our officials. These accounts are clear and there are no problems. It is my duty. You flatter me. Magistrate Cui smiled. We still have duties to perform and will not stay here any longer. Farewell. The censor said to the county magistrate and turned to the 3 young men behind him. Let's go. I will see you out. County Magistrate Cui escorted those people to the door. When the 2 censors turned around, he nodded to one of the young men in an unnoticeable manner. Qinghe County. 3,000 taels of silver in half a year. Magistrate Wei, you are very capable. The censor named Wan Su looked coldly at the magistrate and waved his hand. Arrest him. They had just checked the accounts of Qinghe County and found that there was a deficit of 3,000 taels of silver. The accounts involved were all handled by this magistrate. According to the emperor's decree, anyone who embezzled more than 1,000 taels of silver could be arrested on the spot and escorted to the capital. Magistrate Wei was pressed on the shoulders by 2 imperial guards. He looked at a young man behind him and said loudly, I recognize you. Zheng family. You are from the Zheng family. Didn't I reject your offer? How dare you frame me like this? I will definitely seek justice from the emperor. Take him away. Wansu snorted. The students from the Abacus Academy had been ordered by the emperor to help them check the accounts. In reality, they were no longer helping. Without them, the mission would not have gone so smoothly. The deficit accounts were clearly displayed. No matter what personal grudges they had, corruption was corruption and there was no way to argue against it. Courting death. Seeing Magistrate Wei being escorted away, Zheng Zijian's mouth twitched. He held the abacus in one hand and followed the others out of the county government. Within a day, 3 officials were escorted to the capital for corruption. The officials in the counties near the capital were in a state of panic. The people in the yamen of the capital who had not been found finally began to panic. Every year the imperial court would send people to check the accounts, but in reality there were very few results. How could those who had the guts to make a fuss about the accounts be found out so easily? However, this time His Majesty seemed to be serious. He asked the students of the Divination Academy to help him check the accounts. The imperial court had not been able to find anything for many years. Once they got involved, everyone knew that such a thing would happen because of those students. Bastards, this is how they work for the imperial court. In the hall of diligent government, Emperor Jing slammed the table with a gloomy expression. In just one day he had uncovered a case that involved tens of thousands of taels of silver. The national treasury was in a tight spot, and in recent days he had been meticulously calculating every single coin he had. However, he did not expect that these officials would be so daring in corruption. If even the capital was like this, then what would the situation be like in even more remote places? Where did all the funds allocated by the imperial court go? How many people falsified the annual tax accounts in various places? Your Majesty, please take care of your body. Don't get angry. Changde stood behind him and pressed one hand on Emperor Jing's back as he spoke slowly. At this moment, Prime Minister Qin stood up and bowed. Your Majesty, in this old minister's opinion, the matter of checking the accounts can no longer be done. Check. Why can't we check it? Emperor Jing slammed the table and said coldly, I want to see how many more vermin like them are in front of me. Prime Minister Qin looked up, sighed, and silently returned to his original position. It was necessary to check the accounts. Every year the imperial court sent imperial censors to check everywhere. They would always catch some vermin, which was also a kind of deterrence for other officials. However, it was said that officials should be honest and clean, but how many of them could really live up to these words? He had already understood the method of checking the accounts of the students of the academy. In this way, almost all the officials' accounts would be exposed in broad daylight. How much of a shock would this cause to the entire imperial court and the whole world? If they really did as His Majesty said and thoroughly checked, I'm afraid, the country would no longer be a country. Emperor Jing looked down at the dozen people below and asked, Dear ministers, what else do you want to say? No one, including the 2 prime ministers and the 6 ministers, answered. They were all old foxes in the officialdom. This time, His Majesty was clearly determined to eliminate a group of people. If they raised objections at this time, didn't it mean that they had a guilty conscience? Moreover, during this period of time, His Majesty's actions had become more and more resolute. He was autocratic and even refused to listen to advice. Even if most of the edicts were for the Jing kingdom and the world, his methods were still too tough. If it was not handled well, the entire imperial court would be shaken. In the academy, Chen Lisan, Cui Shixin, and the others had just returned. They all looked happy and high-spirited. Our luck is really bad. Why are you the only ones who found out? Li Jianren looked a little depressed and said with a sigh. The other 3 groups all had gains today. Only they did not find any big mistakes in the accounts, so they returned empty-handed. Cui Shixin smiled and said, It's okay. I'm afraid it will take a long time to check the accounts. Your luck won't always be so bad. At this time, Zheng Zijian suddenly looked at Cui Shixin and asked, The county magistrate of Wang County? Cui Shixin looked at him and said, He's an uncle in the family. They looked at each other and smiled. They both understood something from each other's eyes. This time we can finally hold our heads high. Chen Lisan smiled and couldn't help but show a proud expression on his face. Before today they did not even think that they would have such a big harvest from the accounts. Those imperial censors were all decorations. As long as they did not make it too obvious, this was completely a feast for them. When he thought about the faces of those people at home, he couldn't help but feel extremely happy. The other students of the academy looked at them with envious expressions as they walked past them. They had already heard about what happened today. In terms of ability they far surpassed these people, but they had no chance. They could only watch as the credit fell on their heads. The Qin family. In a certain room, a woman said with a worried expression, "I wonder how Feng is doing. He hasn't been home for a few days. How is he going to take care of himself?" The middle-aged man sitting at the table said, "Madam, don't worry. He is no longer a child. He can take care of himself. As parents, we can't give him anything. We can only rely on him to earn everything." The woman sighed and said, "Fortunately, His Majesty values the Mathematics Academy very much. After Feng comes out from there, go and beg father to find a good job in the court. It's true that Yu is the young master of the Qin family, but my Feng also has the blood of the Qin family flowing in his body." "I understand." The middle-aged man pondered for a moment and nodded. The room remained silent for a moment before the woman said, "Will His Majesty investigate the accounts this time? Will he find you?" The middle-aged man shook his head and said, "It's just a small matter. Catching a few county magistrates is enough. This matter involves a lot of people. His Majesty's order is only temporary and won't last long. If this goes on, the court will be in chaos in a few days. When that time comes, it will stop and we won't be able to find a place like the 6 ministries. This matter has nothing to do with us." The middle-aged man raised his head and said, "It's not easy to enter the academy. Otherwise I would have sent someone to tell Feng not to participate in this matter. Even if the Imperial Censorate hid the identity of those people, it would not be able to withstand the investigation. If he really has the opportunity to become an official in the future, I'm afraid it will be a disaster and not a blessing." Chapter 605. Young Master, the Imperial Court seems to be checking some accounts recently. They have found more than a dozen corrupt officials. Everyone is talking about it. Should we also check the accounts of the shops? Feng walked into the room from outside and asked Li Yi. "No need." Li Yi bowed his head and said, waving his hand as he was busy. The accounts of the shops were checked every month. They had been taught how to check the accounts. Maybe someone could take a little advantage, but it was unlikely for a slightly larger amount to happen. "He's not one of us. He might have other intentions," Feng said with some worry. "What should be checked has been checked. Nothing can be found even if you check again. Instead, it will make others think more, which will do more harm than good." Li looked up and said, "If it were you, would you be willing to be checked all day?" "Okay then." Feng thought about it and felt that it made some sense. He was also uncomfortable to be suspected by his wife for hiding money all day long. "If you are really greedy and someone comes to check you, what will you do?" Feng glanced at Li Yi and said, "Young Master, I don't hide money. You can't say that. I didn't say that you hid money to buy jewelry for Xiaohong." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "I mean, if you are a shopkeeper of a shop and someone comes to check you because you are greedy, what will you do?" "That depends on how much I am greedy." Feng thought about it and said, "Thousands of taels? Thousands of taels?" Feng curled his lips and said, "Can thousands of taels be called greedy?" He almost forgot that this guy's current net worth couldn't be measured by common sense. He asked again, "Hundreds of thousands of taels?" "Hundreds of thousands of taels." Feng looked at Li Yi and suddenly laughed. "If hundreds of thousands of taels are found out, won't it be fatal? If it were me." A sinister smile appeared on Feng's face. He slowly raised a hand and made a gesture of cutting his neck. The county magistrate of Qin County had all his property confiscated, his official position removed, and he was sent to prison. The magistrate of Qinghe County had the same treatment as him. Later, 2 officials who were found to have embezzled tens of thousands of taels would probably lose their heads. His Majesty had just flown into a rage in the Golden Hall. Prime Minister Qin and several ministers had advised to stop the audit of the accounts and had been scolded. His Majesty's action directly indicated that the audit of the accounts would not be stopped for a while. This also meant that many people would be unlucky. "Prime Minister Qin, this is absolutely wrong." After the morning court, Prime Minister Qin walked out of the main hall. A middle-aged official followed behind him and said anxiously, "Purging all the corrupt people in the Qing dynasty cannot be so eager for quick success. If His Majesty continues to be so radical, the Imperial Court will fall into chaos in less than half a month. His Majesty has made up his mind. No one can persuade him." "To be careful," the minister said. "Prime Minister Qin, Master." Seeing Prime Minister Qin leave, the middle-aged official's face flashed with a trace of undetectable gloom. He walked out of the palace gate, got on a carriage and said in a low voice, "Investigate." A sound came from outside the carriage. Someone was walking away. "Who is it?" "Find them immediately. We can't let them investigate any further." Send people to Qin County, Wang County, and Qinghe County to inquire. Find a way to make them stop. If necessary, don't hesitate to. The same gloomy voice sounded in some parts of the capital. The Imperial College was different from the Imperial College. It implemented a semi-closed management. There were 5 days of classes and 2 days of rest. During these 5 days, no student was allowed to leave the college unless there was a mission. Today was the day of rest that they had been waiting for. The students were free to go out and visit their relatives and friends, or go to the brothel to have some fun. It was their freedom. When Qin Feng stepped into the Qin family's gate again, he finally felt a sense of relief. Young master, slow down. Qin Yu walked out of the mansion with a few green-clothed servants following behind him, cautiously reminding him of this. Qin Yu glanced at Qin Feng before shifting his gaze and brushing past him. Trash. Qin Feng watched the young master of the Qin family walk past him. When the few of them walked away, he whispered. In the mansion, the person he disliked the most was this young master of the Qin family, who had a tarnished reputation and almost lost the face of the Qin family. However, this person was the eldest son of the Qin family. In the end, the Qin family would be handed over to this person. Qin Feng gritted his teeth and secretly spat in a certain direction. He strode into the mansion. Feng, you're back. How are you in the academy? Are you used to the food and living here? A middle-aged woman came out from the courtyard and grabbed his arm. I'm used to the food and living here, Qin Feng said with a smile. Mother, let's go in and talk. Prime Minister Qin had a prosperous family. He had a total of 5 sons, 3 of which were officials in the court. The eldest son of the Qin family was considered to be the one most likely to take over Prime Minister Qin's position. However, because he lost a game in the court, he was transferred away from the center of power. Now, although Prime Minister Qin was still supporting the family, the Qin family's decline was obvious. Today was the Qin Manor's monthly family banquet. Although Qin Feng also had the qualifications to participate in the family banquet in the past, he could only sit in the corner. As for the topic of the banquet, it had nothing to do with him. Feng, how are you doing in the academy? I heard that your Dean Li is very powerful. How powerful is he? A voice came from beside him. Qin Feng turned his head and looked over. He casually said a few words and then retracted his thoughts. Sitting beside him was his 5th uncle. Although he was a generation older than him, in terms of presence in the Qin family, he was inferior to him. Because of an incident 2 years ago, he lost all face and became the laughingstock of the capital. Even the servants of the Qin family, who were respectful to him on the surface, were probably mocking him in their hearts. Glancing at Qin Yu, who was sitting very close to the front, a trace of gloominess flashed through his eyes. At this time, Prime Minister Qin's eldest son, Qin Yan, opened his mouth and said, "The Calculation Academy is a good place. If you can successfully graduate from there, your future prospects will be limitless." Qin Zhong. What a pity. Knowing the importance of the Calculation Academy, the Qin family arranged for 2 people in the Calculation Academy, Qin Zhong and Qin Feng. However, Qin Zhong was expelled from the Calculation Academy on the first day. The reason given by the Calculation Academy was very sufficient. Even the Qin family had nothing to say. Qin Zhong lowered his head. At this time, it was better for him not to open his mouth. Qin Yan didn't seem to have any intention of continuing this topic. He thought of something, looked at Qin Feng and asked, Feng, do you know who the Calculation Academy cooperated with the Imperial Censor to investigate the accounts? For an official of Qin Yan's level, he actually didn't pay much attention to the events of the past 2 days. The accounts couldn't be traced back to him and the Qin family. He also wouldn't go and provoke the emperor at this time. At this time he only asked in passing. Qin Feng was just thinking about how to reveal this matter. He really wanted to see the shocked expressions on the faces of his uncles and grandfather. Hearing this, he smiled and said, "Regarding this matter, I'm afraid that uncle will have to repeatedly warn Uncle Feng. Brother Feng has only been an official for 2 years, but his table manners are a bit ugly. If it weren't for me helping him hide it yesterday, uncle might have heard his name in court today." The Uncle Feng he spoke of was Qin Yan's best friend. If it weren't for him raising his hand yesterday, Uncle Feng's son probably wouldn't have had an easy time today. After he finished speaking, he looked at Qin Yan and the other uncles with a slight smile. He even looked at Qin Yu with an obscure gaze. Although his words were a bit tactful, it wasn't hard to guess that the storm that engulfed the entire capital in the past 2 days was caused by them. "What do you mean?" Qin Yan frowned as he looked at him. "You seem to have thought of something." His expression changed and he asked, Could it be that among the people that assisted the imperial censor in investigating the accounts, you were one of them? Seeing the shocked expressions on the faces of his uncles, including his father, Qin Feng felt extremely carefree in his heart and slightly nodded his head. It was me. Idiot. Qin Yu raised his head and drank the wine in his cup in one gulp. He glanced at Qin Feng and curled his lips as he spoke. The Qin family's fifth master turned his head and looked at him a few more times. He patted his shoulder, sighed and turned to leave. Chapter 606. What? I'm doing things for His Majesty and the Imperial Court. What did I do wrong? Qin Feng stood up with a flushed face and looked angrily at the family elders. Fool, is this something you can interfere with? The Qin clan's fourth master, who was also Qin Feng's father, pointed at him and said angrily, Do you know how many courtiers you've offended and how many enemies you've made for our Qin clan? Qin Feng originally thought that he would receive praise from everyone, but he didn't expect to be reprimanded instead. Qin Feng's heart was filled with anger. The Qin clan was Qin Yu's Qin clan, not his Qin clan. His future had to be fought for by himself. This was his opportunity, an opportunity that he couldn't obtain in the clan. He looked straight at his father and said loudly, This is an order from His Majesty. What does it have to do with the Qin clan? The situation in the imperial court is very complicated. Do you really think this matter is as simple as an audit? Qin Yin looked at him and said in a deep voice, Your investigation has directly pushed our Qin clan to the opposing side of all the courtiers. Also, the Qin clan, the Chui clan, the Zheng clan. You've caused a great disaster this time. Qin Yan's face was incomparably gloomy. This disaster not only implicated their clans, but also the king of Shu behind them. Li Yi's method of killing with a borrowed knife was too sinister. Qin Xiang, who was sitting at the head of the table, stood up and said slowly, There's no need to go to the academy tomorrow. You're not allowed to interfere in this matter. Qin Feng's face was filled with dissatisfaction. Just as he was about to speak, a Qin family servant rushed in from outside and said, Not good, the Qin family's Li Sun, young Master Li Sun was poisoned to death when he was eating at Drunken Moon restaurant. When everyone in the hall heard this, their expressions changed. Qin Feng was stunned for a moment and looked over in disbelief. Qin clan's Qin Li Sun was eating with friends at Drunken Moon restaurant. After eating and drinking, he walked out of Drunken Moon restaurant. After a few steps, he collapsed, foaming at the mouth and his face turned green. Not long after, he lost consciousness. Fortunately, there was a clinic nearby. After he was carried in, they immediately diagnosed that he had been poisoned. They tried several methods to detoxify the poison, but to no avail. In the end, they pinched his mouth and forced 2 liters of feces into his mouth. After vomiting for a while, he finally woke up. Qin, who had finally woken up, fainted again when he saw the filthy scene in front of him. He was still unconscious until now. After the incident, everyone in Drunken Moon Tower, from the shopkeeper to the waiters and cooks, were captured. However, several hours had passed, and the government still did not get any useful information from their mouths. They only knew that a new chef had been recruited yesterday. After the incident, there was no more news about that chef, as if he had completely disappeared from the world. Just a few days ago, the son of the minister-counselor of the Ministry of Rights was poisoned to death. This matter had not been completely settled yet, and now another son of the Qin clan had been poisoned. Just as everyone was wondering if the mastermind behind the scenes was making another move, another matter came out. The second son of Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works, Li Jianren, had carelessly fallen down the stairs while visiting a brothel. One of his legs had been broken, and he was still lying unconscious in his home. The palace had just sent an imperial doctor over, and it was unknown whether he was dead or alive. If this matter did not attract the attention of the people, then when Chui Shixin of the Chui clan was almost run over by a speeding carriage on the street, no matter how slow the people's reactions were, they should have known that something important had happened. How is it? In the Qin clan, Qin Yin walked up and asked when he saw his third son return. The middle-aged man walked over and said, The Qin clan has already gone over. Li Sun has already woken up, but he has been vomiting non-stop. The Qin clan was worried that something had happened to him, so they had someone knock him unconscious. What about the Li clan? Qin Yin asked again. The middle-aged man opened his mouth and said, Li Jianren. The imperial doctor said that if he can wake up tomorrow, he will be fine. Qin Yan's eyebrows jumped. Then what if he doesn't wake up? If he doesn't wake up? The middle-aged man sighed and said, Then he will never wake up again. The Li clan is in a mess right now. His Majesty has sent out the imperial guards. The brothel has already been surrounded by people, and no one is allowed to enter or leave. Cui Shixin is still fine. He was pushed by the servants beside him and only suffered superficial wounds. The middle-aged man's face was gloomy as he said, "Those people, they are too bold. His Majesty has said that if they embezzle more than 30,000 taels of silver, their heads will be left behind." Qin Yin slowly opened his mouth and said, "If they don't do this, what awaits them is also death." Chen Lisan was poisoned, Li Jianren's life and death were unknown, and Cui Shixin was almost run over by a carriage on the street. Behind the two of them, Qin Feng stood there, his lips pale, his body trembling, and waves of dizziness assailed him. Qin Yin turned his head to look at him and asked, "Now, do you know what stupid things you have done?" Thump. Qin Feng's legs went soft and he knelt down. Chen Lisan, Cui Shixin, Li Jianren, the three famous hedonistic young masters of the capital met with misfortune at the same time. After the authorities got involved in the investigation, they naturally dug out many details that people didn't know. For example, they were all students of the Mathematics Academy. Another example was that they all participated in helping the Imperial Censorate investigate the accounts. After knowing this information, the matter couldn't be any more obvious. Revenge, or perhaps it was intimidation or threats. In a short period of a few days, many officials in the capital were sent to prison by them. Those who should be confiscated had their houses confiscated, and those who should be beheaded were beheaded. Some people had no future and some people lost their lives. How could matters in the officialdom be so simple? The officials were divided into factions and pulling one hair could affect the whole body. Perhaps, the person who was sent to prison was an important chess piece that one of the factions had painstakingly laid out. It was because of their interference that many years of hard work had gone down the drain. Of course, this was also a possibility, but no faction in the court would have the guts to offend the Cui and Qin families at the same time. To be able to do such a crazy thing, it was more likely that they were greedy people hidden among the court officials. Once they were found out, they would definitely die. Under such circumstances, it was not surprising that they would stake everything on one throw and do such an irrational thing. With such a terrible thing happening in the capital, the news naturally spread quickly to the palace. It was said that when the emperor found out about this, he was furious and immediately ordered the Secret Intelligence Bureau to investigate the case. At the same time, he urged the Imperial Censorate to speed up the investigation without any delay. After all, everyone knew that if the investigation continued like this, the mastermind behind the scenes would have nowhere to hide. At some point, thick, dark clouds had already enveloped the entire capital. At this time, a few more pieces of news came out, causing the whole matter to fall into a deadlock. After Chen Lisan was poisoned, Li Jianren was seriously injured, and Cui Shixin fell ill due to fear. Qin Feng of the Qin family accidentally caught a cold. He had a high fever and was bedridden. Zheng Zijian of the Zheng family scalded his feet with hot water and could not walk. The third young master of the Feng family was suffering from hysteria, and the fifth young master of the Han family had a seizure. In short, in one night, 11 students from the Mathematics Academy who were assisting the Imperial Censorate in investigating the accounts fell ill and were injured. The injuries were very sudden, and the illness was very clever. It was not life-threatening, but it was likely that they would have to recuperate at home for a long time. Chapter 607. Qin Feng lay on the bed, his face pale. Although the weather was much better than the cold winter, standing naked outside in the middle of the night was still extremely painful. What? I don't believe that those people are so daring. His Majesty will definitely send more guards to protect us. I don't understand. He gritted his teeth and said with a trembling voice, "This country belongs to His Majesty. Disobeying the Emperor's orders is simply a dead end." Qin Feng's father, Qin Lang, stood beside the bed and looked at him. He said indifferently, "Feng, do you know where you are worse than Qin Yu?" As soon as he finished speaking, Qin Feng suddenly raised his head. Qin Lang looked at him and said, "You want to be valued by His Majesty. This is not wrong. If it was 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, I wouldn't have stopped you. But now, how long can this country stay in His Majesty's hands?" Could it be? Qin Feng's expression changed. Before this, his father had never told him about these things. Qin Lang looked at his pale son and sighed. He said slowly, "After this incident, you should obediently stay in the mathematics school. When the time is right, you will naturally have a bright future. Don't do these things anymore. Does it still hurt?" Zheng Zijian's feet were wrapped in a thick white cloth. A luxuriously dressed woman walked in and asked with a worried face. Zheng Zijian gritted his teeth and said, "No, it doesn't hurt anymore." How can it not hurt when it's boiling water? A middle-aged man walked in from outside the door. He coldly snorted and said, making you unable to get off the ground for 2 months is already very light. Otherwise you will end up like the two from the Chen and Li families. Thinking of Chen Lisan and Li Jianren, Zheng Zijian lowered his head and a trace of fear appeared on his face. Feng family. The current head of the Feng family warned his third son, remember you are suffering from hysteria. Without my permission your hysteria cannot be cured. Forget it, don't go to the mathematics school for the time being. In the Han clan, a young man said with a bitter expression, Father, why did you say that I'm suffering from horse fever? Even if it's hysteria, it's fine. Horse fever? How am I supposed to live in the future? The head of the Han clan snorted coldly and said, your hysteria has been used by the Feng clan. You just have to bear with it. It's better to be cured immediately than to die. For the next few days, you should also stay at home due to your illness. Forget about going to the academy lest you end up like those other families. Tomorrow I'll send someone to the Divination Academy. Tell them that you're seriously ill and that you should stay at home for half a month. Similar conversations took place in the homes of many influential officials. Every family that had children studying at the Mathematics Academy gave their children a series of reminders. He was absolutely not allowed to participate in the imperial court's investigation of the accounts. What happened to the Qin family, the Li family, and the Cui family was a warning. The other families used self-harm to quickly extricate themselves from this matter. Other than the imperial family and the imperial censors, who valued their reputation more than their lives, no one else was willing to get involved in this matter. This chaos was only the beginning. They could only hope that His Majesty could end it as soon as possible. Otherwise, no one knew how chaotic the capital would become. Is there no one willing to continue investigating? In the Hall of Diligent Government, Emperor Jing held a memorial presented by the imperial censor. He narrowed his eyes and tapped the table with his index finger. Changde walked in from outside and said, Chen Lisan of the Qin family was indeed poisoned. The son of Assistant Minister Li of the Ministry of Works was pushed down from upstairs. As for the others, I'm afraid they deliberately did it to avoid trouble. I'm afraid the person behind this is an important official that I rely on. Emperor Jing sighed and said, Changde, you have followed me for so many years. Tell me, was I really wrong this time? A gloomy expression appeared on Changde's face. He said, Your Majesty is naturally not wrong. This old servant also wants to find and kill those vermin who do not do anything. It was a wise decision for Your Majesty to ask County Uncle Li to establish the School of Mathematics. Otherwise, I'm afraid that you will never know that these people exist. Emperor Jing covered his chest and pointed to the thick pile of memorials on the table. He said, Look, these are all memorials to stop investigating the accounts of the officials in the capital. In the court, everyone is in a panic. If I really continue investigating, the court will be in chaos. Changde raised his head but did not say anything. Now that things had reached this point, only His Majesty could make a decision. Emperor Jing rubbed the space between his eyebrows and said, What is Li Yi doing? Today is considered the school's holiday. He is resting at home. Changde replied. Changde thought for a moment and said, What about when the school is not on holiday? Emperor Jing asked again. Changde thought for a moment and said, He is also resting at home? Bastard, besides being lazy all day, what else can he do? He actually let Han an 11-year-old child, take care of such a big school of mathematics. Shanning and Yongning now spend more time with him than in the palace. Emperor Jing's face showed a trace of annoyance. He snorted coldly and said, He really seized the opportunity to use public office for personal gain. The Qin family, the Qin family, the Cui family, the Zheng family, this time he did not let any of them go. I'm afraid he had already expected such a result. County Uncle Li is never willing to suffer losses. Thinking of his speculation a few days ago, Changde nodded slightly. If it were not for the families of those people who came to His Majesty to complain, these people would have all been eliminated on the day of the enrollment of the School of Mathematics. However, they tried their best and even made a certain promise to His Majesty to let these people enter the School of Mathematics. What was the result? It had not even been half a month since the School of Mathematics opened, but several people almost lost their lives because of this. The others did not hesitate to harm their bodies to avoid disaster. If they knew this would happen, why did they do it? Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, Let him enter the palace to see me. Fang said with a face full of amazement, Those people are really ruthless. I heard that the young master of the Chen family was poured with a lot of feces to save his life. There is also that b*tchly. When he went to the brothel he almost fell to his death. The rest of the people were also injured and disabled. Yes, they are really ruthless. Li Yi nodded and agreed with his words. He had met Qin Feng and Seng Zijian students many times. They usually looked gentle, but when they attacked they were really ruthless. They did not even let go of himself. Such people were too dangerous and not worth being friends with. What was more dangerous was the corrupt officials of the Jing kingdom. They were so ruthless. The poor students of the School of Mathematics. If all of them were injured and had to lie at home for a few months, they would definitely fail the final exam. What would they do if they were kicked out of the School of Mathematics by Li Han? Wouldn't this make heroes bleed and cry? How sad, he really did not expect those corrupt officials to be so crazy. They learned from their mistakes. The students of the School of Mathematics could not be sent out. Otherwise it would be pushing his students into the fire pit. If he had known that he would have to risk his life to check the accounts, he would have asked the Imperial Censorate for more money. This time he had suffered a great loss. Thinking of the silver, Li Yi felt a little heartache. When he saw Chang's face, his heart ached even more. Chapter 608. Your Majesty. Changda's face was stiff. Just as he opened his mouth, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Let's go." Changda's mouth was half open as he froze in place. When he came back to his senses, Li Yi had already walked out the door. You know that His Majesty wants to summon you into the palace? Li Yi was too lazy to reply to Chang's words. Wasn't it obvious? The old emperor had obviously gone overboard with the investigation of the accounts. He was probably doubting his life right now. Moreover, Changda was the old emperor's personal eunuch and would not easily leave the palace. Under normal circumstances, when he saw Chang, he would most likely summon him into the palace. Wait here for a while. I'll be right out. At the palace gate, Li Yi got off the carriage and turned his head to speak. Seeing Fang's hesitant expression, he looked at him and asked, "What's the matter?" "Say it." "Son-in-law, can you bring me in with you this time?" Fang had a troubled expression as he said, "I haven't seen what the palace looks like yet." Li Yi looked at Changda and saw him nod. He had the others wait at the palace gate. He waved at Fang and walked into the palace gate. Fang followed closely behind. Granny Lu looked around as if she was looking at a grand garden. Her gaze lingered on the tall palaces for a long time. "His Majesty is inside. You can go in by yourself." Changda stopped at the entrance of the imperial garden and stopped Fang, who wanted to follow him in. After walking through a bluestone passage that was more than 10 feet long, the familiar pavilion was in front of them. Sit. In the pavilion, Emperor Jing was not wearing a dragon robe. He was only wearing bright yellow casual clothes. Li Yi looked at the porridge on the table, rubbed his stomach and said, "Your Majesty, I just ate at home." Even if he had eaten, he still had to eat. It was a good habit to only eat until he was 80% full. He hadn't eaten in the palace for a long time and the imperial chef's skills had improved. In this matter, did I really do something wrong? Emperor Jing suddenly asked without rhyme or reason. What is it? Li Yi was drinking the soup with a spoon. He thought that it was necessary to go to the catering office and ask how the soup was made. It was sour and sweet, so Rui should like it. Emperor Jing glanced at him and said, "Don't play dumb in front of us." Li Yi put down the spoon's side and said, "His Majesty is not wrong. It is this world that is wrong. Speak human language. It's not wrong for His Majesty to want to get rid of the parasites in the court. However, if there are too many parasites, the entire court will collapse if he wants to get rid of them all. The imperial court cannot collapse." Emperor Jing frowned and asked, "Can we really not investigate any further?" Li Yi drank another mouthful of soup and said, "If we don't investigate, wouldn't it be too easy for them?" "Are you going to investigate or not?" Emperor Jing looked at him and asked. "Investigate?" Emperor Jing was about to ask him how to investigate, but Li Yi's tone changed. "Investigate? Whether to investigate or not, it's up to your Majesty to decide." Seeing that the old emperor's breathing was a little short, as if he was about to have an asthma attack, Li Yi hurriedly said, Your Majesty, what's wrong with you? Someone call the imperial doctor. How can we keep the court in order and make them spit out the money they have embezzled?" Emperor Jing looked at Li Yi and said, "I will leave this matter to you." Li Yi almost spat out the soup and said, "Your Majesty, this is too offensive. It will offend all the civil and military officials in the court." Emperor Jing looked at him and asked, "So you want others to offend you? Someone has to disregard their own interests and do something for the country. If everyone only thinks about themselves, how can the country be strong and how can the people be rich?" Li Yi sighed and said, Your Majesty also knows that I have offended enough people in the court. If I don't bring a few guards with strong martial arts skills, I won't dare to go out. The people's hearts are terrible. Those enemies of mine, whether it's in the open or in the dark, are almost endless. They even use men of sacrifice. They don't even dare to drink tea when they go to someone's residence. The guards at home are a little more powerful than others. If I offend more people, I'm afraid there will be no place for me in the big Jing kingdom. Really? Emperor Jing frowned and asked. Your Majesty, believe it or not, if I walk home from the palace alone, Your Majesty will never see me again. I can't offend them? Li Yi said with a sigh. Emperor Jing glanced at him and said, among the officials in the court, who can't be offended more than you? They should be the ones who should be more worried, right? It was a little unconscionable to say this. He didn't offend anyone at home all day and people came to climb the wall in the middle of the night. When did he take the initiative to harm others? How did the king of Shu treat him? How did the Chen and Shui families treat him? Assassinations by men of sacrifice, impeachment by the court. They were simply unscrupulous. In the face of ferocious enemies, how did he respond? He helped the king of Shu build momentum and help him win the hearts of the people to fight for the throne. He disregarded the past and allowed the children of his enemies to go to school. He taught them knowledge, gave them meritorious deeds and gave them a bright future. Who else in the world could disregard the past and repay evil with good? Well, the money in the national treasury was not used for the people. They were all fed to these vermin. I can't swallow this, but I can't continue to investigate like this. It will mess up the court. You have a lot of ideas. Help me with some ideas and I won't care about you being lazy at home all day. Jing Emperor picked up his chopsticks and began to eat without waiting for his response. It was obvious that he didn't give him a chance to refuse. The atmosphere was slightly awkward. Li Yi once again filled a bowl of soup for himself and looked up at Jing Emperor. The dignified king of a country only cared about money. Last time he said that he stinked of money. Now it seemed that he was the stinkiest one. Your Majesty, before that, I want to clarify that I am not being lazy at home. Li Yi put down the bowl and said, I am actually, Jing Emperor took out a crispy melon from somewhere and took a bite. He said, what? Haven't you thought of a reason? For a moment he really couldn't think of a good reason. Li Yi sighed and said, well, Your Majesty, let the intelligence office send all the accounts to the School of Arithmetic. Then send 1,000 imperial guards to surround the School of Arithmetic. 3 days later? Will this method work? Jing Emperor put down the milk melon and looked at him. Li Yi took the last milk melon on the table and took a bite. He said, whether it will work or not, we will know after we try it. Then he added, by the way, send the accounts that have been checked over together. Jing Emperor looked at him and asked, why? Li Yi explained, the School of Arithmetic has developed a new and more scientific method of checking accounts. The accounts that have problems in the past must have problems. The accounts that have no problems in the past may not be really good. In that case, let them send it together. Jing Emperor nodded. He stood up and walked outside. Well, I will arrange this matter early. You should also go back and make some preparations. Li Yi looked up at him. Your Majesty, I don't know how to calculate the wages? Jing Emperor narrowed his eyes. What wages? Your Majesty, you also know that the students are risking their lives to check the accounts. We can't? Emperor Jing sat down again and said, well, today I will properly calculate with you the problem of the salary. He looked up. This expression. How is this calculating wages? It is clearly calculating accounts. Your Majesty, go first. Li Yi picked up the spoon again. I will finish this bowl of soup. Chapter 609. Son-in-law, how much do you think it will take to build such a large palace? As the two of them walked out of the palace, Fang pointed to a palace not far away and asked. Li Yi glanced at the palace and said, no amount of silver will do. What? Fang was startled and quickly asked. This kind of palace can only be built by the royal family. If others build it, they will be overstepping the rules and will be beheaded. There were many rules in the royal family. There were rules for what kind of person, what kind of carriage, and what kind of house could be built. If one overstepped the rules, others might suspect that one wanted to rebel or something. It was even more foolish than hiding the dragon robe at home. Fang thought for a moment and asked, then can we find a place to build it secretly? No. Changde, who was walking in front, flatly refused. Fang's budding dream was shattered just like that. The investigation of the accounts seemed to have really blown up. Although a few students from the School of Mathematics who were assisting the Imperial Censorate couldn't continue the investigation due to their injuries and illnesses, The emperor's determination to eliminate corrupt officials didn't change at all. The secret intelligence unit moved out that night. From the 6 ministries to the local government, all the accounts were packed and sent to the School of Mathematics. Even the places that had been checked before were checked again. Seeing the accounts being carried away box by box, many officials' hearts raced. This night was destined to be a sleepless night for many officials in the court. At the same time, all the city gates in the capital were suddenly monitored strictly. Every city gate was guarded by no less than 100 imperial guards. They were conducting strict checks on people entering and leaving the city. The atmosphere in the morning court was especially gloomy. Other than a few insignificant reports, all the officials stood in their positions obediently and didn't say a word. As usual, the emperor announced the end of court after asking a few questions. The officials who had left court were no longer talking and laughing as they usually did. They were all in a hurry. When they left the palace, they couldn't help but look in a certain direction. Even the figures of the 1,000 imperial guards at the entrance of the School of Mathematics could still be vaguely recognized. When he raised his head, the clear sky seemed to be covered in thick dark clouds that pressed down on him, making it hard for him to breathe. The Qin family. Qin Yen slammed the table and said angrily, "It's fine if you didn't think through the pros and cons of this matter and participated in it, but you actually covered up for a criminal. Do you know that the accounts you checked this morning have all been sent back to the School of Divination? If you're found out that you're covering up for your own friends, that's a crime of deceiving the emperor." Looking at his furious uncle, Qin Feng's already pale face turned even paler. Then he felt the world spin around him. His vision went black and he lost consciousness. Feng, a middle-aged woman's expression changed and she quickly walked to the bed. "In Kaifeng there's Justice Bao. He's impartial and incorruptible." In the small garden of the Qin manor, the 5th master of the Qin family drank a little wine. From time to time he would pinch a bean into his mouth and shake his head. "5th master, what kind of place is Kaifeng?" A big man standing behind him asked in confusion. "It's written in the opera. Who knows where this place is?" The 5th master of the Qin family didn't even raise his head as he said, "In the future, don't doze off in the brothel and ruin 5th master's mood." The big man nodded repeatedly. The 5th master was extremely fond of opera. It was said that his most beloved concubine was an entertainer. Later on she died for some reason. However, this hobby of the 5th master had never changed. The 5th master of the Qin family suddenly sighed and said, "Feng, this child's brain is still too simple. If he becomes an official in the future, I'm afraid he'll be eaten by others until not even his bones remain." After a pause he continued, "However, I'm afraid he won't have the chance to become an official in the future." The Zheng family. "Idiot, look at what stupid things you've done." The head of the Zheng family, the right assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Zheng Shichen, slapped his son's face. His expression was exceptionally sinister. "Cover up? Who do you think you are? You still want credit? There's no credit left. Do you know what this is? This is deceiving the emperor. Even losing your head is not enough." Hearing this, beads of sweat rolled down Zheng Zijian's forehead. His whole body trembled like a sieve. The Cui family, the Qin family, the Feng family, the Han family. After several officials scolded their sons, they gritted their teeth and spat out these 2 words. After gnashing his teeth for a while, the anger on his face turned into deep regret. The Academy of Mathematics should not have begged His Majesty to let them in. Half of the children of the aristocratic families are on sick leave? Li put down his book and looked up. A professor from the Mathematics Academy quickly said, "Yes, Sir Dean. Today there are less than 30 people who returned to the Academy." Li waved his hand and said, "Then give the rest of them a few days off. It just so happens that the Academy is busy these few days. They won't be able to help much." As soon as he finished speaking, a general of the Imperial Army walked in from outside. He cupped his hands and said, "Sir Li, all the accounts have been delivered. Thank you for your hard work." Li stood up and said with a smile. The leader of the Imperial Guards was flattered and quickly said, "We are following the Emperor's orders. This is our duty. Sir Li, you are too kind." At this time, the 66 students from poor families had gathered at the entrance of the Mathematics Academy's classroom. "This is your first chance to serve the Imperial Court. What you need to do is to carefully check these accounts. Every time you find a problematic account, you will be able to accumulate 1 credit. This credit will be used for the final evaluation at the end of the semester." Li Han put his hands behind his back and paced in front of the students. He said something loudly and occasionally stopped to look at his palm before continuing to speak. The students from poor families were excited. This was the first time they had a chance to apply what they had learned. Not to mention they could also obtain credits. They would not have to worry about the final examination and would be able to contribute to the imperial court. They had long been eager to give it a try. At this moment, no one held any grudges against the 11 children of the aristocratic families who monopolized this opportunity. Poisoning, pouring feces, breaking a leg, being hit by a carriage. It turned out that going out for an internship was so dangerous. If that was the case, wasn't this the dean's way of protecting the students from poor families? The dean had really put in a lot of effort. Now that they could sit in the mathematics academy and be protected by so many imperial guards, it was all because of the dean. Even if those corrupt officials wanted to take revenge, they would not be able to do so. Thinking of this, everyone looked at the figure walking over from the side, and their faces were filled with deep gratitude. Time is of the essence. Everyone keep your spirits up. We must finish checking all the accounts within 3 days. Li walked in front of everyone and looked at them. Are you confident? Yes. Everyone answered in unison. Not long after, the entire mathematics academy was filled with the sound of beads colliding with each other. Every official who passed by the school of mathematics couldn't help but feel depressed. It seemed peaceful outside, but everyone knew that a storm was brewing inside that could engulf the entire imperial court. Once the gates of the mathematics academy were opened, a terrifying storm would be released. Chapter 610. Bang! Li knocked away Li Xian's east wind, and chose a card. 30,000. 2 days ago, the students of the arithmetic faculty had begun to calculate the accounts nervously. The officials of the imperial court were all on edge because of this matter. They couldn't sleep well or eat well. They had lost 5 kilograms in 2 days. As the dean of the arithmetic faculty, if he were to play mahjong in the faculty, it would be a little too much. Fortunately, the school was not far from the palace. Li Xian had been busy in the Academy of Sciences next door. Since the Princess Royal was playing mahjong, they needed one more player. Finally, they called the arrogant Lolita over. Win. The arrogant Lolita pushed down her card wall and smiled. Give me money, give me money. Yongning stood by Li Yi's side. Her heart ached as she passed a copper coin to Li Yi. In just an hour, the copper coin in her hand had been reduced by half. While shuffling the cards, Emmingza looked up at Li Yi and said slowly, "Today more than 10 officials said they were sick and didn't attend the morning court. The morning court ended in less than a quarter of an hour." She paused and said, "If it drags on for a few more days, I'm afraid half of the people in the court will be gone. We'll know the result tomorrow." Li looked at the cards. They were very good. He casually played a south wind. Now he just needed to wait for 6 or 9 rounds of winning. When the arrogant Lolita pushed down the card wall and said with a smile, "Give me money." Mahjong couldn't be played anymore, so they played poker. Li Yi and the arrogant Lolita were on one side, while Li Xian and the princess were on the other. After a while, Yongning's smile became bright. "Father, are you really going to find all the corrupt officials? Play cards well. Look at how professional Li Xian was." The Princess Royal Highness couldn't stop talking about the state affairs. Li waved his hand and said, "How is that possible? If we catch all of them, I'm afraid the entire court will be purged." Mingzhu's expression softened as she asked, "Then why do you still want to check these accounts? You'll know during the morning assembly tomorrow." Li Yi arranged his cards and changed the topic. "How's your matter going?" "Everything is going well." Mingzhu nodded her head and said, "According to what you said, a large piece of land has been set up outside the city and a workshop has been built. Most of the farmers near the capital have sent over girls above the age of 13. The textile machines have also been improved. Soon, the clothing shops in the capital will be able to open on a large scale. When the time comes, we'll have to break it down. Clothes for the commoners and those for the nobles and officials have to be separated. For the latter, it'll take 2 more days of work and the craftsmanship will be more exquisite. The price will be 100 times more expensive. Also, send someone to manage the military rations business with the family of generals. You're a princess, so it'll be easier for you to interact with them. No one will gossip about you. I'll just be in charge of collecting money." Li Xian was a little depressed as he asked, "Why can Mingzi do the military rations business but I can't?" Li glanced at him. Was this guy stupid? Although he was considered half a member of the royal family, he was still the son of a prince. What would the courtiers think if he made such a good relationship with the family of generals and went there every other day? A smile suddenly appeared on Li Xian's face. He didn't mind this matter anymore. He threw out a few cards and said, 3 and 2. I only have 1 card left. I can't afford it. Li waved his hand. 3 2s and 2 3s. He couldn't afford it. Mingzu was on his side. Even if he could afford it, he wouldn't want it. Royal bomb. The Tsundra Lolita threw out all the cards in her hand. Straight, we won again. Give me money, give me money. When it came to playing cards and chess, there was no more reliable teammate than the Tsundra Lolita. Yongning was busy collecting the money. Li Xian was a little discouraged. He thought of something and asked, Mingzu, your birthday is coming soon. What present do you want this year? This kind of question was wrong. Who would directly ask others what present they wanted? When the time came, they could directly give others a few million taels of silver. It would definitely be more shocking than any present. The Tsundra Lolita raised her head to look at Li Yi and asked, Sir, what present do you intend to give my royal sister? My birthday is coming soon. Your present can't be worse than my royal sister's. It's a secret for now. Li Yi actually didn't know when Mingzhu's birthday was. However, it was just in time this time. He should be able to prepare it soon. My birthday is the same as Mingzhu's. Li Xian turned to look at Li Yi with a meaningful gaze. Li Yi cupped his hands at him. Happy birthday. The second day, it's already the second day. In an official's mansion in the capital, a middle-aged man was anxiously pacing in the courtyard. There were a few blisters on his mouth. Master, are you still not going to the court tomorrow? A woman walked out of the house and said worriedly. The middle-aged man waved his hand impatiently and said, No, I'm not going. Just say that I'm sick, very sick. As soon as he finished speaking, a servant came forward and reported, Master, people from the palace have come. The middle-aged man's face immediately turned pale. His legs went soft and he asked with a trembling voice, Come. How many came? 1. The servant said, Master, do you want to see him? No. Go ask him what's the matter. The middle-aged man waved his hand and quickly walked to the bed in the room to lie down. He used 2 pieces of old ginger to wipe his face. He immediately looked much weaker. Not long after, the servant came in from outside. Left? The middle-aged man asked. The servant replied, He left. The middle-aged man got up from the bed and asked, What did he say? The eunuch from the palace said that His Majesty has something important to announce in the morning court tomorrow and cannot ask for leave. Even if his life is hanging by a thread, he must be carried to the Golden Hall. The middle-aged man's vision turned black and he weakly fell onto the bed. At different times, there were many officials who also felt that their vision was turning black. In the past few days, almost half of the officials in the court had been gone. It seemed that they had all contracted some kind of acute illness overnight. They were so sick that they could not even go to court and could only rest at home. His Majesty did not say much about this. It seemed that nothing had happened in the past 2 days. There was nothing unusual in the court. However, on the second day, he sent a eunuch to inform those officials who were sick that they were not allowed to ask for leave in the morning court. The message was very clear. Even if they were to die, they had to die in the court. Everyone knew that all the accounts sent to the mathematics school would be settled the next day. Next, it was time for His Majesty to settle the accounts with them. The various city gates of the capital had been tightly guarded by the imperial guards. It was easy to enter the capital but difficult to leave. Furthermore, the vicinity of the homes of the officials in the court had probably already been closely watched by the secret intelligence unit. If they made any abnormal movements, the secret intelligence unit would immediately come to their manors to ask for a cup of tea. Li Yi was not worried that there would be people in the capital who would not be able to sleep that night. He was also not worried that their bodies would not be able to take it after not sleeping well for many days. He looked at the oval glass bead that Fang handed over. There were almost no bubbles inside. Although there was still a bit of color, it did not affect it much. In the past month, after many improvements in equipment and craftsmanship, he had finally pushed it to this step. He could finally use it to swindle money. He could finally use it to benefit the vast number of women in the capital. If we improve the craftsmanship, it will be even easier to swindle money. Li Yi handed the glass bead to Fang and reminded him again. At the same time, a carriage loaded with boxes drove out of the mathematics school and straight into the palace gates. Chapter 6:11. Going to morning court was a very troublesome matter. Usually one could lie in bed until 8 o'clock. If one wanted to go to court, one had to wake up at 6 o'clock. Li Yi had never been interested in going to court. Unfortunately, the old emperor had announced yesterday that he could not be absent from today's morning court. Whoever asked for leave would be recorded in a small booklet. It was said that a minister who was seriously ill was brought into the palace by eunuchs. At this moment he was sitting on the chair in front. Waking up late would ruin the morning, and waking up early would ruin the day. The consequence of waking up early was that he had to lean against General Shui's pillar for a while. He missed the bed in the dew hall. There was still some time before the morning court began. If he had known earlier, he would have gone to the eldest princess's place to lie down. Boy, don't stand out during the morning court. This matter is not something you can interfere with. General Shui patted his shoulder and warned him. Li yawned and opened his eyes. Don't worry, old Shui. I won't say a word today. I'll just lean against here and wait for the court to end. I'm serious this time. General Shui frowned and said, this time, His Majesty asked the divination school to investigate the accounts. Although you are not to be blamed, don't expect the court officials to remember your good deeds. This matter has become too big. Don't get yourself into any more trouble. I know. Li Yi said seriously and continued to lean against the pillar to nap. Today's morning court session was a one-man show for the old emperor. No one could interrupt him. In the Golden Hall, other than a certain person leaning against the pillar and a few ministers who were given a seat because of their health, all the court officials stood quietly in their seats. Some had sallow faces and some had sunken eyes. It was obvious that they had not lived well these past few days. There were even some who seemed to have been sucked out of their spirits. They were extremely dispirited and looked up from time to time with eyes full of fear. Emperor Jing arrived an hour later than the appointed morning court time. It was not until Li Yi had caught up on his sleep that he saw him slowly walking out from the back of the hall accompanied by Changde. Greetings, Your Majesty. Emperor Jing sat on the dragon throne and the court officials bowed. Hundreds of people spoke in unison. No need for formalities. Emperor Jing raised his hand. There was no special expression on his face as he said, "Does anyone have anything to report today?" It was silent below. Everyone knew that the accounts had been checked and the emperor would definitely fly into a rage at the morning court. Many officials in the court would not be able to safely hang their heads on their necks. However, at this moment the emperor's calm attitude was really puzzling. Before figuring out the situation, who would dare to speak at this time? At this moment, an imperial censor stood up, bowed and said, Your Majesty, I accuse Chen Lisan, Qin Feng and Cui Shixin of the Divination Academy of abusing their authority for personal gain. They relied on Your Majesty's trust to deliberately cover up the guilty officials during the accounts investigation a few days ago, disrupting the public's view, and attempting to deceive Your Majesty. As soon as these words came out, several people in the court immediately became gloomy. However, many people were slightly stunned. They knew that Chen Lisan, Qin Feng, Cui Shixin, and the others had helped the imperial censor to investigate the accounts. They were the ones who had uncovered the corrupt officials that His Majesty had dealt with previously. However, they only knew about this matter and did not know that these people had actually done something to cover up. These playboys were really bold and presumptuous. Did they really think that they could do whatever they wanted just because they had families behind them? It should be known that if this matter was investigated further, it would be a crime punishable by death. The crime of deceiving Your Majesty was a crime that could not be punished. The imperial censor named Chen Lisan and the others and then singled out the officials who had been covered up one by one. Many people in the court began to have strange expressions on their faces. This was really covering up. They had actually let off all the officials who were in the King of Shu's faction, but not a single one of the other factions had been left out. These playboys were even more daring than the elders in their families. At this moment, an official stood up and said, Your Majesty, Cui Shixin and the others are only students of the college and not officials of the imperial court. They were working for the imperial court and were plotted against by villains. Regardless of what happened, they did not deserve to die. Although this official was also in the King of Shu's faction, he did not belong to the families behind these 11 people. He also had no connection with the officials who had been covered up. At this moment, only he could stand up and speak for these 11 people. Please show mercy, Your Majesty. Please show mercy, Your Majesty. After the imperial censor finished speaking, several more people stood up to plead for mercy for these people. There was only one reason, and that was to prevent this matter from being classified as deceiving the emperor. Otherwise, not a single one of these people would be able to escape. In fact, there were even 2 families with small numbers of people who would not be able to continue. Although the 11 of them have done meritorious deeds, their merits do not make up for their mistakes. They have sacrificed their work for personal reasons and covered up for their friends. Since they are not officials of the imperial court, from today onwards, These 11 people will be expelled from the College of Divination. The imperial court will never hire them again. Emperor Jing finally spoke, which made many people feel relieved. Never hiring them meant that they could only be playboys waiting to die in the future. They would never be able to enter the imperial court as officials. Although this result was still cruel, at least they could keep their lives. For big families like the Chui family, the Qin family, and the Qin family, the future of a collateral descendant was not a big deal. Of course, it was different for Lord Zeng of the Ministry of Revenue. If he could not give birth to an outstanding son with his wife, the Zeng family, which had struggled so hard to climb up, would end with his generation. Chui Yun Can, the county magistrate of Wang County, Qin Qin, Tian of the Department of Granaries. Emperor Jing named the names of the officials who were covered up by them one by one and said in a low voice, "Order the intelligence department to arrest these people and bring them back to the Ministry of Justice within 1 day." Not only did they not cover up the officials, but they also got themselves involved. The King of Shu's faction was really unlucky these days. If the King of Shu could return to the capital one day, who knew how many officials loyal to him would be left? Does anyone have anything else to report to the emperor? After a series of orders, Emperor Jing sat back on the dragon throne and asked everyone. Naturally, no one said anything. At the same time, many people had a glimmer of hope in their hearts. If no one else reported to the emperor, then, would today's morning court session end here? If so, didn't it mean that the emperor would let bygones be bygones? Thinking about it, this case involved a wide range of people and almost covered the entire imperial court. How could the emperor arrest everyone? If so, how many officials would be able to stand here tomorrow? Many people secretly breathed a sigh of relief in their hearts. They should have thought of it earlier, The law did not punish the masses. Although the current situation of the Jing kingdom could not be considered as having internal and external troubles, it was not very good either. Moreover, the emperor's body could not hold on for too long. According to the emperor's character, the most important thing was to ensure the stability of the imperial court. How could he do such a radical thing at this time? This time he probably just wanted to arrest a few examples to deter them. Unfortunately, this lucky thing happened to the officials of the King of Shu's faction. These days they really should not have been so worried, since everyone has nothing to say. Emperor Jing stood up from the dragon throne and said, "Then, let me say a few words." His face suddenly darkened and he said coldly, "Come, arrest the Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Rights, Qin Bo, the Left Assistant Minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Feng Yuan, the Director of the Du Branch, Han Ning, for me." Emperor Jing called out a total of nearly 10 people's names. In the crowd, these people who had just relaxed suddenly tensed up. They looked up and their faces instantly turned pale. Chapter 6:12. How dare you? The officials he had just called out had already been taken away by the imperial guards who had rushed in from outside. Emperor Jing looked down with a gloomy expression. In a few years, hundreds of thousands of taels of silver. I am not raising officials but a group of vermin. This official is guilty, please have mercy, Your Majesty. Please have mercy, Your Majesty. Please have mercy, Your Majesty. At this moment, no one had any illusions. Nearly 10 people knelt on the ground and cried out loud, tears and mucus flowing down their faces. A trace of fatigue appeared on Emperor Jing's face. He waved his hand and said, "Remove these people from their official positions. First, take them to the Supreme Court and confiscate their property. Put everything into the national treasury." Soon, those people were taken away by the imperial guards. The court officials below were all silent. They looked at the ground and did not dare to raise their heads. The highest official that had been called out by His Majesty was a 4th-rank official. A little higher would be the Minister of the 6 Ministries. In recent years, it was the first time that such a large number of officials had been dismissed. And looking at His Majesty's expression, this was just the beginning. Could it be that His Majesty had really made up his mind to overthrow the entire court? Yesterday, the Divination Academy sent the results of the accounts to the palace. Emperor Jing turned around and walked up. He sat back on the dragon throne and said, "I looked through the accounts all night. I am very distressed." Hearing His Majesty's voice sink, the hearts of many court officials also sank. According to the previous situation, any problematic accounts could not be hidden from the students of the Divination Academy. Didn't that mean that all the evidence of the corruption of the capital's officials was in His Majesty's hands? Thinking of this, even those officials who had a clear conscience felt a chill on their backs. As for those who felt guilty, their feet were already a little unstable. This time, could it be that they really could not escape? Boy, His Majesty trusts you the most. This time, does His Majesty really plan to catch all those people in one fell swoop? Old General Shui pushed Li Yi and asked with a frown. Just now the old emperor had spoken so loudly that he couldn't fall asleep. Li Yi was already awake. Hearing the words, he opened his eyes and said, "You generals should know what His Majesty will do, right?" Old General Ma waved his hand and said, "His Majesty's actions these days are very different from before. Even the few of us can't figure it out. Brat, don't keep us guessing. Hurry up and tell us." Li Yi shook his head and said, "How could His Majesty allow the court to fall into chaos?" "Generals, don't worry." Old General Shui stared at him and asked, "Do you really know the inside story?" "Sure." Li Yi raised a finger and whispered, "This time it's up to the generals to grasp the opportunity." A moment later, Old General Shui's face lit up as he asked, "Is this true?" Li Yi retorted, "When have I ever deceived the generals?" "Good lad." Old General Shui patted him on the shoulder and rubbed his palms together. His eyes shone brightly. A faint fragrance drifted over to his side. The princess was standing beside him and asked, "Did something good happen?" During morning court sessions, the princess was the only woman who could enter this hall. Li Yi thought for a moment and felt that he should bring the princess along. Just as he was about to speak, another figure came over. The left assistant minister of the Ministry of Revenue, Feng Yuan, was born into a poor family and failed in the imperial examinations. It was I who made an exception and recruited him. In the past 15 years he has been promoted single-handedly. The Ministry of Revenue is in charge of money and rations. Do you know how much he has embezzled? 150,000 taels, a whole 150,000 taels. Do you know that for the sake of 50,000 taels of military expenditure, the Minister of War and the Minister of Revenue almost got into a fight in front of me? That's not even enough for Feng Yuan to embezzle for a year. You may not know the director of the inspection branch, Qining, but we remember it very clearly. In the 8th year of Xuanhuan he became a jinshi. In the 10th year of Xuanhuan, we promoted him to be the director of the inspection branch. 80,000 taels in 3 years. Jing Emperor's voice gradually turned from grief and indignation to pain. Some of the officials below were pale and trembling, while others showed shame on their faces. All of you here are not without problems. You are not much better than the people we have just captured. Touch your conscience. Do you still have a conscience? After a moment, Jing Emperor seemed to be tired from speaking. He sat back on the throne in a somewhat dispirited manner and said, "We have finished speaking. It's your turn to speak." Most of the officials still had their heads bowed and the entire hall was silent. At this time, whoever spoke first would be the first to face the emperor's anger. This official has something to say. Amidst the silence, an unhurried voice came from behind a pillar. Looking at the young man who walked out from behind the pillar, everyone's faces showed surprise and confusion. County Uncle Li, it was actually County Uncle Li. The investigation of the accounts was done by a student of the School of Mathematics. As the dean of the School of Mathematics and the person with the most royal favor in the court, he could have stayed out of it, but he stood up at this time. What did he want? Didn't he know that His Majesty was angry and whoever stood up would be unlucky? In the crowd, the assistant minister of the Ministry of Appointments, Li Mingze, raised his head and showed a worried expression. The Minister of War Yan Bing frowned slightly. The capital governor Dong Wenyun looked at him in surprise. There were also a few people in the corner who looked at him with gloating eyes. "Speak." Jing Emperor glanced down and said lightly, "Reporting to Your Majesty." Li Yi raised his head and said, "The School of Mathematics has been open for half a month. In order to create a good learning environment for the students, I want to dig an inner lake in the School of Mathematics. However, the school's budget is insufficient, so I want to apply for a grant from Your Majesty." Before he finished speaking, many people in the hall were stunned. Was he talking about digging a lake? His Majesty was talking about corruption. What did it have to do with digging a lake? What did digging a lake have to do with the study of the School of Mathematics? Did County Uncle Li really think that he could be so presumptuous in the court just because he was valued by His Majesty? Without waiting for them to react, another figure walked out. Old General Shui said in a rough voice, "If I may be so bold, I would like to ask Your Majesty to allocate 100,000 taels of silver to purchase a new batch of military equipment for the frontline soldiers." Li Yi glanced at General Shui. He asked for 100,000 taels. Old Ginger was spicier and his heart was more ruthless. Before people could figure out why General Shui wanted to join in the fun, there was another voice in the hall. The eldest princess came forward and said, "I have been ordered to build a women's college. I am short of 50,000 taels." Li Xian, the son of Prince Ning and the Dean of the Academy of Sciences, stepped forward and said, "The Academy of Sciences is about to open. I would like to apply for 50,000 taels of research funds from your Majesty." Crazy, they were all crazy. This was the most intuitive feeling of the courtiers. It was because the national treasury was tight that there was this investigation of accounts and His Majesty's thunderous anger. Wasn't it courting death to say this kind of thing at this time? It was understandable that County Uncle Li was hysterical and General Shui was old and confused. But why did the eldest princess and the eldest prince come up to join in the fun? The expressions of many people in the imperial court immediately changed, and many people revealed expressions of schadenfreude. The next moment, Emperor Jing stood up and slowly said in front of everyone's eyes, "The new mathematics is very important to our Jing kingdom. The soldiers are fighting at the front line, and the ordnance is indispensable. The establishment of a women's college is also a matter for women. The research of the Academy of Sciences is beneficial to the country. But the national treasury is tight, and the money needs to be used in the most important places." Emperor Jing thought for a moment and said, "The national treasury can't be used arbitrarily. How about this? I will take out 10,000 taels from the inner mansion. As for how to distribute it, you can discuss it yourself." General Shui quickly said, "Your Majesty, you must not. The inner mansion is responsible for the expenses of the palace. You must not mix it with these." Emperor Jing waved his hand and said, "It doesn't matter. In the future, the standards of the banquets in the palace will be reduced, and I will save some money from other places." All the courtiers in the hall were stunned. His Majesty did not blame him at all and smoothly took over the topic. Compared to these things, the matter of accounts that almost caused the court to collapse seemed to be more important, right? Among the many courtiers, a middle-aged official suddenly came to his senses. The next moment, his breathing became a little rapid, and his face became flushed. He took a deep breath and took a big step forward. He said righteously, "Your Majesty, the inner mansion is responsible for the expenses of the palace. It has already been carefully planned, and the expenditure must not be reduced. As a courtier, I should share your Majesty's worries. I am willing to donate 20,000 taels for the soldiers of our Jing kingdom." Many officials in the court were stunned for a moment. After looking at each other, they finally seemed to realize something. Immediately, many people's faces became excited. Chapter 613. At this time, if there were still people who did not understand the purpose of County Uncle Li's appearance, they were not qualified to stand in today's court. Of course, it was impossible for His Majesty to arrest all the corrupt officials in the court or drag them out to be beheaded. Not only would the court collapse, but the entire official system of the Jing kingdom would also collapse. However, corruption was real. His Majesty could not pretend that he did not see it. If he downplayed it, this phenomenon would become more serious in the future. His Majesty needed a way out, and some officials in the court also needed a way out or a chance to atone for their crimes. Now this opportunity had appeared. After an official from the Ministry of Revenue walked out, another official stood up and said with a serious face, "Your Majesty, the students of the Mathematics College are the future pillars of the court. I am willing to donate 5,000 taels to the Mathematics College." As soon as he finished speaking, another official followed, "I am willing to donate 8,000 taels to the Women's College. I am willing to donate 10,000 taels to the Academy of Sciences. Your Majesty has worked hard for the country and did not hesitate to reduce the expenditure of the inner residence. I am deeply ashamed and am willing to donate half of my family property." All the officials in the court had never been so patriotic and so loyal to the emperor. For the sake of sharing the emperor's worries, they would easily donate thousands of taels. In the future, it would definitely be a heavy stroke in the history books. During the reign of Jing He, the emperor was benevolent and reduced the taxes of many affected states, causing the national treasury to be empty. In the second month of the third year of Jing He, the officials were generous and donated nearly 1,000,000 taels of silver in one day. Some even donated half of their family property. They were the role models among the officials and were used by many emperors in the later generations to spur the officials. In the Golden Hall, Emperor Jing sat steadily on the dragon throne. The expression on his face was much more relaxed than before. No one knew when a table had been moved to the front. Deputy Minister Ma of the Imperial Censor sat there and took notes. The officials lined up one by one and fought to be the first to donate their family property. For them, this was not giving away their wealth but fighting for their lives. All the officials present had already left a criminal record with His Majesty. His Majesty did not seem to want to pursue the matter, but under such circumstances, if anyone pretended to be stupid, their ending would not be much better than those who had been dragged out. Some officials didn't even know how much they had embezzled. At this moment they had to make a rough estimate. They could only give more, not less. If they didn't have enough money, they had to sell everything they had and scrape together the money. If His Majesty found that the amount was not right after the comparison, he might use their official positions or their heads to make up the number. If they really couldn't come up with the money, they could only donate more than half of their family's wealth and use their sincerity to influence Her Majesty. Ma Zhongqing sat upright in front of the table, his hand writing in a very upright manner. He raised his head to look at the official who was walking over and smiled. Lord Su, tens of thousands of taels? 20,000, Lord Zhou? 10,000, Wei, 5,000. Kid, tell me honestly, did you come up with this idea? Old General Shui stood behind the pillar and asked Li Yi. Old Shui, you're wrong. This kind of thing isn't something a kid can participate in. Li Yi waved his hand and shook his head. Old General Shui's face was full of disbelief. If this kid didn't mess up with Her Majesty, if this kid didn't collude with Her Majesty, why would he remind them to seize the opportunity? Li Xian was about to walk over when he was pulled back by Li Yi. Li Yi looked at him and asked, "What are you going to do? Donate money?" Li Xian's face was full of doubt as he asked, "So many people have already donated. Aren't you going to donate some?" Old General Shui shook his head. Emingzi looked at him but didn't say anything. Li Yi sighed and waved his hand saying, "Go, go." Seeing his expression, Li Xian immediately stood still and said, "That's not right. Is there something I didn't think of?" Li Yi pointed at the dozens of officials who were chatting at the side and asked, "Why aren't they donating?" He was really starting to suspect if this guy's brain was really lacking in sensitivity to politics. In this aspect, even Her Royal Highness as a woman was better than him. After a moment, Li Xian finally came to a realization. Brilliant, really brilliant. Which immoral guy came up with this idea? If those corrupt officials knew about it, wouldn't they hate him to death? Thank you, County Uncle Li. When an unfamiliar official walked over, he stopped by Li Yi's side for a moment, cupped his hands and said in a low voice. Under Li Xian's astonished gaze, another person walked over and said in a low voice, "I will remember Lord Li's kindness. Let me give you a suggestion." After dealing with a few people, Li Yi turned back to look at Li Xian and said, "When you go back, eat more walnuts. Remember not to use the door clip." Her Royal Highness walked over and frowned. "I didn't expect there to be so many vermin in the imperial court. If the 5th and 6th rank officials are already like this, won't they be even more daring if they go higher up?" Li Yi shook his head and said, "Petty officials are greedy. The higher you go, the less common this phenomenon is. The higher one's official rank was, the more importance they would place on their reputation. Their every move would be watched by countless people. Moreover, to them, a few thousand or 10,000 taels of silver was disdainful. At that level, which official didn't have a huge family or influence behind them? Only an idiot would delay their career for the sake of money. The purge in the imperial court this time was mostly aimed at middle-level officials. Those above the 3rd rank were not involved. On one hand, these officials couldn't be easily touched. On the other hand, Li Yi had checked the accounts. Except for a few, the rest were relatively minor and harmless. After all, the annual tax revenue of the Jing kingdom didn't exceed 10 million taels of silver. The old emperor wasn't blind. It was impossible for him not to notice that too much money disappeared at once. Of course, this was the capital where the emperor lived. The situation outside the capital was definitely more serious than here. The old emperor was really obsessed with money. The morning court session lasted for a long time. The morning court session still exceeded everyone's expectations. There was thunder, but it didn't last long. More of it was a light breeze and drizzle. The difference was that if someone didn't know what was good for them, the drizzle might be followed by thunder. They knew how much they had taken. This time, His Majesty was merciful and only punished a few typical people. As for the others, if they took the initiative to donate money, they wouldn't be held accountable. But it was only this time. Even if they avoided this time, they might not be able to avoid the next time. From now on, some people in the imperial court would have to be careful. If they went out of line again, they would have to settle old and new accounts at the same time. Of course, in the eyes of those officials who weren't affected, His Majesty's move was extremely brilliant. After today, the situation in the imperial court would change greatly. All the forces would be reshuffled, especially the king of Shu, who would suffer heavy losses. Among them, the Qin family, the Qin family, the Cui family and a few other big families would suffer heavy losses, but it wouldn't shake their foundation. However, for those officials who didn't have a solid foundation, His Majesty had a handle on them. They could only pray for themselves in the future. It could be foreseen that His Majesty's control over the entire imperial court would reach its peak in the future. It would even reach a peak that none of the previous emperors of the Jing kingdom had reached. Your Majesty, about the matter of the cultivation lake in the academy. In the rear hall, Li looked at Emperor Jing and asked tentatively. 30,000 taels. Emperor Jing seemed to be in a good mood. He waved his hand and said, I will only give you 30,000 taels. You can figure out the rest yourself. After a moment of shock, Li immediately cupped his hands and said, Thank you, Your Majesty. I will leave first. Looking at his decisive action, Emperor Jing's expression froze and he asked, How much money did you originally want from me? Li had already stepped out of the hall. He turned his head and said, Your Majesty, I had originally planned to ask for 50,000 taels of silver, but the national treasury is tight. I will think of a way to get the remaining 20,000 taels of silver. Should I have said 10,000 taels just now? After Li Yi's figure disappeared, Emperor Jing touched his chin and said regretfully. Changde thought for a moment and said, Judging from County Uncle Li's decisiveness just now, I'm afraid 5,000 taels is also possible. Chapter 6:14. Husband, I don't think there are any holidays these days, right? Looking at the gifts that almost filled the entire room, Rui asked in surprise after thinking for a bit. This was not the most surprising part. Usually, her family did not have much contact with the officials and nobles in the capital. Even if there were holidays, it was impossible for her to receive so many gifts. The people who gave the gifts were all officials in the capital. Some of them were servants from their families while others came personally. Their attitudes were very polite. Even when the housekeeper invited them into the manor for a cup of tea, they were rejected. They put down the gifts and left. It was extremely strange. Li casually waved his hand and said, My wife, you don't have to worry about these things. In any case, if someone gives you gifts these days, just accept them. Don't worry. This time he accepted the gifts with peace of mind. He did not feel any psychological pressure at all. The officials in the capital were still polite and gave expensive gifts. Based on the situation, they should have kept some of the money they had donated in court that day. If they knew that the old emperor had only planned to deal with a few greedy people and had decided to burn the accounts for the stability of the court and let the others go, would he take back these gifts? However, these gifts should still be accepted. After all, he had spent a lot of effort to persuade the old emperor to change his mind. Furthermore, he did not gain much from it, so why bother? After dealing with a few corrupt officials, the storm in court finally calmed down. After that, Li did not go to court again. However, he heard that there had been a lot of personnel changes in court these days. Officials were promoted and demoted. Departments like the Ministry of Revenue had been purged from head to toe. Everyone chose to remain silent about the old emperor's big moves. The storm from the last corruption case had just passed and had not completely subsided. At this time, no one dared to speak too much and remind the emperor of some bad things and bring up old matters. Most of the officials in court would not let them go. As expected, the person who made money the easiest in the world was the emperor. With just a few words, he had immediately earned nearly 1,000,000 liang of silver. He had also established his prestige in court, intimidated a large number of people, recruited a large number of people, and taken the opportunity to purge a large number of people. He had killed several birds with one stone. This was a very good deal. Earning money was easy, but getting money from him was harder than ascending to the heavens. However, 30,000 taels of silver was more than enough to repair a lake. In this day and age, labor was not worth much, not to mention that the silver had to be kept for more important things. In the future, it could be used as research funds and the like. How could it be spent on such a small matter as repairing a lake? The timetable of the academy had changed these days. From morning to night, the sequence was digging the lake, going to class, digging the lake, and resting. Digging a lake wasn't just about digging a lake. How deep to dig it, how to design the waterways, all of these had to be carefully calculated. If any of these were not done well, the course would fail. Yes, digging a lake was also a subject. This course was a compulsory course for all students. Regardless of whether they were from an aristocratic family or a poor family, they had to obtain 2 innovation credits. Otherwise, even if they obtained full credits, they still wouldn't be able to graduate. It was said that the purpose of this course was to strengthen the physique of the students of the mathematics department, to train their ability to solve practical problems, to work together, to dig a lake, and so on. In any case, this was the dean's good intentions. The poor students wouldn't doubt it, and it was useless for the children of aristocratic families to doubt it. If they didn't want to dig, they could just leave. The mathematics department had no shortage of people. No one dared to disobey or look down on this young dean, because no one knew when he would recommend you for an internship. Everyone knew how dangerous it was to go out for an internship. Li Jianren lost a leg, and it was said that he almost lost his life. Qin Lisan was poisoned, and his life was hanging by a thread. He was only saved by 2 liters of feces. To him, living was probably worse than death. The others didn't end up well either. Some were sick, some were injured, and what was even more unacceptable was that they had put in so much effort, but in the end they were still expelled from the mathematics department by Her Majesty. They would never be hired by the imperial court again. They could only be hedonistic sons for the rest of their lives, and their bright and limitless futures were ruined. Therefore, these hedonistic sons who had never suffered much in their lives could only put down their pride and dignity, dig the lake with the poor students, eat from the same pot, and sleep in the same room. As the dean of the mathematics department, Li Yi of course wasn't in the mathematics department. Li Han would help him supervise the digging of the lake in the classes. He was very active in these things because if he worked hard he would have enough holidays and enough guards. He could play wherever he wanted. For Li Han, who grew up in the palace, the outside world was infinitely attractive. These days Li Yi was busy. Rui wasn't in a good mood, so he could only find ways to make her happy. He even went to the palace to learn a few new dishes and gave her the first string of colorful glass beads he produced. Xuanhuan in Mississippi. Lu were jealous, but he didn't give it to her for a few days. Fang walked in from the outside mysteriously. He put something covered with a red cloth on the table and asked in a low voice, "Young master, how much is this thing worth?" He lifted the red cloth, and a crystal-clear guanyin statue about a foot tall appeared in front of Li Yi. The guanyin statue was made vividly. Its facial features were clear and its expression was very vivid. Under the sunlight it gave people a strong visual impact. Li Yi didn't understand the market, but the more transparent something was, the more precious it was in this world. This guanyin statue, for the Buddhist believers, was definitely something worth fighting over. He originally planned to give it to the madam and didn't consider the price. But after careful consideration, the cost of this thing wasn't low. The equipment, materials, mental damage, and the old craftsman's labor cost would cost at least 1 tael of silver. Selling it for 5,000 taels of silver wouldn't be too much, right? Through what happened in the court a few days ago, he had a general understanding of the wealth of the officials in the capital. 5,000 taels of silver, there were many people in the capital who could afford it. "Young master, there are a few monks outside who want to see you. Do you want to let them?" Xuanhuan walked to the door and had just opened her mouth to speak when her gaze was attracted by the transparent guanyin statue and couldn't move away. "Monks." A trace of doubt appeared on Li Yi's face. He said, "Let them in first." Last time, Rui said that the old monk Tan Yin had invited him to the cold mountain temple to discuss Zen, but Li Yi never went. This time the old monk probably came looking for him. Sure enough, when a shiny head appeared in front of him, the old monk Tan Yin's face also appeared. "Amitba, young benefactor Li, long time no see." The old monk Tan Yin's smile was still so kind as he said a Buddhist greeting. "Master, long time no see." Li Yi thought to himself that whatever he needed would come. He could also ask the old monk how much this guanyin statue was worth. That way he would have a reference price in his mind. "Master, come quickly. Help me see how much this guanyin statue is worth." The smile on Li Yi's face was very warm. He casually ordered the little servant girl, "Xuanhuan, Master Tan Yin is an honored guest. Quickly go tell the kitchen to prepare a table of good wine and good dishes, 8 meat and 8 vegetables. Remember to cut 2 tails of pig's ears with minced garlic." Chapter 6:15. Monks abstain from eating meat. "Young benefactor Li, please don't joke around. There's no need for a banquet." The old monk, Tan Yin, still had a faint smile on his face as he said, "Young benefactor just said something about guanyin." At some point, Master Tan Yin's voice suddenly stopped as he stared at the guanyin statue on the table. The young monks behind him also widened their eyes. The next moment, a pious look appeared on their faces. Fang took a step forward with some vigilance. If these monks dared to rob him, he would not be polite. "Master, master." Seeing that the old monk had stopped talking, Li Yi stretched out his hand and waved it gently in front of his eyes. Master Tan Yin's body shook, and then a look of guilt immediately appeared on his face. He said, "Amitba, I lost my composure for a moment. I hope young benefactor Li won't blame me." It's okay. Li Yi smiled and waved his hand saying, "Master, how much do you think this guanyin statue is worth?" Amit Ba. The old monk chanted the name of Buddha again and said, "This is the sitting statue of Guanyin Bodhisattva. How can it be measured by these things in the secular world?" "Master, you mean?" Li looked at him and asked with some uncertainty, "Is this a priceless treasure?" "Priceless." The old monk nodded and said, "Glaze is a priceless treasure. Such a precious glaze statue of Bodhisattva can't be measured by money. It should be worshipped by believers in the temple. I wonder if young benefactor Li can give this glazed Bodhisattva statue to the Cold Mountain Temple?" Li Yi's expression froze as he looked at the old monk Tan Yin in disbelief. He had originally thought that he himself was shameless enough, unconventional enough. He had not expected that this Master Sandalwood Yin would be even more shameless, unconventional than him. He had already said that it was a priceless treasure. How could he have the cheek to say that he would give it to the Cold Mountain Temple? Hearing this, Fang's face immediately fell and he took a step forward. Although this old monk didn't look like someone to be trifled with, if he wanted to snatch this thing away, he would definitely let him have a taste of his fist. "Master, you must be joking." Li Yi smiled and said, "We spent a lot of effort to get this glazed statue of Buddha. It's worth a lot and we're planning to sell it to the Fahua Temple." Master Tan Yin's expression changed and he immediately asked, "I wonder how much young benefactor Li plans to sell this glazed Buddha statue for." 5,000 taels? Li Yi asked tentatively. "How much is Fahua Temple offering you?" "Our Cold Mountain Temple will pay double." Before Master Tan Yin could speak, a young monk behind him immediately stepped forward and said anxiously. Fei Ming stepped down. Master Sandalwood said softly, and the young monk immediately retreated. Although the young monk retreated, there was an anxious look on his face. Cold Mountain Temple and Fahua Temple were the two most famous temples near the capital. Both of them had a large number of believers. If Fahua Temple got their hands on this precious glazed statue of Goddess of Mercy, they would definitely treat it like a treasure and advertise it to attract more believers. In this way, wouldn't the Cold Mountain Temple soon lose out to them? Li Yi glanced at the young monk. 5,000 taels in double, wouldn't that be 10,000 taels in total? This young monk could make the decision for such a large amount. Monks were actually so rich. It seemed that the old emperor's anti-corruption campaign this time had targeted the wrong target. "I was being rude just now." Master Tan Yin bowed to Li Yi and said, "It's just that this glazed Buddha statue is very important to the Cold Mountain Temple. I hope that young benefactor Li can make it convenient for us. As for the price, please rest assured that the Cold Mountain Temple will definitely not let you suffer a loss." "Well said, well said." Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Master and I are friends. If I really want to sell this Buddha statue, of course I will consider the Cold Mountain Temple first." The old monk chanted again, "Amit Ba. In that case I will thank young benefactor Li in advance." An hour later. "Thank you, young benefactor Li. I will take my leave now." "Young benefactor Li, you don't have to see me off anymore. Goodbye, master." Li Yi smiled and saw Master Tan Yin and the few young monks out of the door. One of the young monks reminded the young monk, "Senior brother, you have to hold on tight. Don't fall. If you break it, it will be a great sin." "Don't worry." The young monk hugged the things in the bag tightly. This was a great opportunity for the Cold Mountain Temple to flourish, attract believers, and surpass Fahua Temple in one fell swoop. How could he be careless? "I've forgotten that the reason I'm looking for young benefactor Li this time is to ask him to translate a scripture." The old monk Tan Yin sighed and said unhurriedly. Although the matter of the scripture was temporarily put on hold, the harvest was far better than the scripture. "Master, are you leaving just like that?" A soft voice came from beside him. Master Tan Yin turned his head and nodded slightly. "Madam Li." After a few simple greetings, Master Tan Yin and the few monks turned and left. However, after taking 2 steps, he looked back with a meaningful look in his eyes. "Master, what's wrong?" the young monk asked in confusion. Master Tan Yin shook his head and said, "Nothing, let's go." "Oh my God." After watching Master Tan Yin and the few monks leave, Fang sat down on a chair and picked up the teacup with trembling hands. 8,000 taels, a full 8,000 taels. The thing made from the pile of sand was sold for 8,000 taels in the end. Moreover, according to the reaction of the monks, this price could be increased. When he walked out of the courtyard and looked at the pile of sand not far away, he instantly felt that he was the richest person in the world. Inside the house, Li Yi paced in the hall. A glass guanyin statue was sold for 8,000 taels. Anyway, the monk was rich. If he made another Buddha statue and told Fahua Temple that Cold Mountain Temple bought a glass guanyin statue from him for 20,000 taels, would Fahua Temple buy the Buddha statue for 30,000 taels? If he told Cold Mountain Temple that Fahua Temple spent 50,000 taels to buy a taller and larger glass Buddha statue, would Cold Mountain Temple spend another 100,000 taels to buy an upgraded guanyin statue? If he told Fahua Temple that Cold Mountain Temple spent 150,000 taels? Forget it, he couldn't do that. This was too heartless. There would be retribution if he cheated the monks like this. Even if he wanted to cheat them, he couldn't just cheat Cold Mountain Temple and Fahua Temple. Jinshan Temple, Nanhua Temple, Donghua Temple, Beihua Temple, Shihua Temple. He could cheat them one by one. After he cheated the Jing Kingdom, he could go to the Qi Kingdom. After he cheated the Qi Kingdom, he could go to the Zhao Kingdom. He could cheat all the monks in the world. How much would that cost? After he cheated the monks, he could also cheat the Taoist priests and build a pile of glass statues of Taishang Laozi. He could visit the Jing Kingdom, the Qi Kingdom, the Zhao Kingdom. He was rich, he was rich. What was the Wang family? What was the Ma family? From now on, the Li family would be the richest in the world. Chapter 6:16. Son-in-law, is the soup ready? Xuanhuan had just poked her head in from outside the kitchen when she was pushed back by Li Yi. I still need another 15 minutes. I'll call you when it's ready. Rui liked the sweet and sour soup from the dining hall very much. She had specially learned it last time, and now it was an indispensable dish on the family's dining table every day. The maidservant stood guard outside the door while the son-in-law brewed soup for the young miss. She actually wanted to go in and help, but the son-in-law wouldn't let her, not even when the second young miss wanted to sneak a sip. The son-in-law was treating the young miss better and better these days. However, the son-in-law was also very good to Xuanhuan and the second young miss. The maidservant raised her wrist and looked at the colorful bracelet on it. Every time the maidservants in the residence saw it, their eyes would almost pop out. Perhaps it was because he had helped the old emperor earn a lot of money last time, but he didn't say anything about the management of the academy at home these days. In these few days, Li Yi had placed most of his energy on the glass, no, on the colored glass. Because the sand contained metal elements, the colored glass that was produced was mostly colored. Transparent glass was more difficult to produce, and a large part of it depended on luck. Thus, the colorless glazed guanyin statue sold to the old monk Tan for 8,000 taels was not expensive at all. If not for his friendship with the old monk and sold to the Fahua Temple, they wouldn't even be able to touch it for less than 20,000 taels. He had originally considered selling 2 statues to the Fahua Temple at a high price, but after some thought, he decided against it. That would be a little too unethical. In 2 years he wouldn't even be able to be friends with them. Although what happened here 2 years later wouldn't affect him much, the thought of being hated by all the monks and Taoists in the world and being cursed all day long made him shudder. This business was too risky. His family was a small temple and couldn't withstand such a big storm. Thus he had to rope in at least 2 reliable partners. The Wang family was one, but it wasn't too safe. The safest way was to rope in the old emperor who only cared about money. He had been jealous of the silver of the officials and nobles in the capital for a long time, and he wasn't afraid of offending anyone. He was definitely a good partner to work with. Although this way they would earn a lot less money in the future, they wouldn't have to be scolded and they wouldn't have to bear grudges. The risk was almost zero and it was still very worth it. This matter could not be rushed. He had to plan step by step. While benefiting the nobility in the capital, he had to strive to maximize the benefits, and at the same time mess with the Cui family. Fang walked to the door and said, "Son-in-law, that Wang guy is here again." "Brother Li." Wang Yong walked in from outside, cupped his hands and greeted with a smile. "Brother Wang, there's no need to stand on ceremony. Please sit." Just as he was thinking about the Wang clan, Wang Yong came over. After Xuanhuan served tea, the two did not exchange many words before Wang Yong went straight to the point. Wang Yong raised his head and said, "This time my father asked me to come over. He wants to ask about the big business that Brother Li mentioned last time." Although the two of them had reached an agreement on that big business last time, Wang Yong still didn't know what that big business was until now. It was only because of his trust in County Uncle Li's ability and the Wang clan's principle of being greedy for money that he didn't ask. Li smiled and said, "Even if Brother Wang didn't ask, I would still tell you today. Brother Wang, please wait for a moment, I will be back soon." "Fang, come with me for a moment." Li walked out of the door and said to Fang, who was leaning against the wall to eavesdrop. Wang Yong picked up the teacup and took a sip. There was a trace of doubt on his face, but it quickly disappeared. Not long after, he saw County Uncle Li and the big man come in with a few boxes of different sizes. Old Fong walked out and closed the door behind him. "Brother Li, this is?" Li handed over a square box and said, "Brother Wang, open it and you will know." Wang Yong took the box and was surprised to find that it was a bit heavy. After opening the lid, his face was stunned for a moment and then immediately widened. There was a fist-sized ball-shaped object in the box. It was colorful, and as it shook slightly, it gave off a brilliant glow. As the eldest son of the Wang clan, he had seen countless treasures, so he recognized what it was with a single glance. Colored glass. He raised his head to look at Li Yi and asked in disbelief, "Colored glaze is a natural object, the head of the 5 famous artifacts and one of the 7 treasures of Buddhism. It is rarely seen. Brother Li, where did you get this colored glaze?" Li didn't answer and asked with a smile, "In Brother Wang's opinion, how much is this colored glass ball worth?" Wang Yong shook his head and said, "Colored glass is extremely rare, and such a regular shape is even rarer. Once it is out in the market, I am afraid that countless people will fight for it, especially the Buddhists, who will certainly not let it go. Its value is really hard to estimate. However, if it is handed over to the Wang clan, we can at least sell it for this amount." Wang Yong stretched out a finger. 10,000 taels. Li smiled and said, "There is no hurry. Brother Wang, look at the others first." Wang Yong nodded and closed the lid of the box. He carefully put it away and opened another box. In an instant, he was almost blinded by the colorful light that overflowed from the box. Another colored glass ball. A different colored glass ball. Wang Yong raised his head abruptly and glanced at Li Yi. He seemed to have realized something. After putting the box away, he opened the other one. This time he could no longer suppress the shock on his face. He put down the box and reached for another. 7. The expression on Wang Yong's face was a little dazed. There were a total of 7 glass balls, 7 glass balls of different colors. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked, "Brother Li, where did you get these things from?" Li looked at him and asked again, "Brother Wang, how much do you think these glass balls are worth?" Wang Yong was startled and said, "The rarer something is, the more valuable it is. Any treasure, if there are too many of them, the value will be greatly reduced. If these glass balls are thrown out at once, the value will definitely be greatly affected." Li smiled and took out the 8th glass ball from the box. He weighed it in his hand and said, "Then what if there are only 7 of these glass balls in this world and you can summon the dragon god by gathering all 7 different colored glass balls?" What? Wang Yong was confused. What? He let go of the glass ball and it fell to the ground, shattering into pieces. Wang Yong's expression changed drastically. He quickly stood up and said, "Brother Li, what are you doing?" Li looked at him and said, "Then there are only 7. Wang Yong was startled and slowly sat down. He took a deep breath and said, "Brother Li, how many more glass balls do you have?" Li smiled and said, "I accidentally dug up a glass mine. I can have as much as you want." Wang Yong was startled again. After a moment he raised his head and said, "Brother Li, you should know that if we sell off a large amount at once, the glass will lose its original value. Moreover, if there are more glass balls in the future, we will immediately become the target of public criticism." "Not us." Li shook his head and said, "It's you." He looked at Wang Yong and said, "The Li family will not be involved in this matter. The glass balls were brought in by a wealthy merchant from another country. The Wang family bought them at a high price and sold them for charity in the capital. 40% of the proceeds will be donated to the National Treasury for disaster relief. His Majesty will also be involved in this matter?" Wang Yong asked with a serious expression. Li thought about it and nodded. "How much will the Wang family take?" he asked again. 20%, Li Yi said straightforwardly. Chapter 617. 20%? Wang Yong's expression changed. After thinking for a long time he said, "Brother Li, I'm really sorry. I can't make the decision. I need to go back and ask my father." "There's no hurry." Li waved his hand and said, "This is a serious matter. I'll go back now." Wang Yong stood up and walked 2 steps before coming back. He pointed at the boxes on the table and asked, "Can I finish looking at these?" "Brother Wang, feel free." Wang Yong nodded. His face was filled with excitement. He opened another box and his face immediately glowed. Then, the second, the third. After a while he turned around and pointed at the pile of boxes. He asked Li Yi, "These glass chopsticks, glass cups, glass jewelry?" Li Yi nodded. "They were all dug out from the mine." "This too?" Wang Yong pointed at the last brocade box. There was a 2-foot-tall statue of a woman in it. It was vivid and lifelike. This too, Li nodded again. It's so strange. Why is there everything in this glass mine? I'll take my leave. Wang Yong looked excited. After cupping his fist at Li Yi, he did not say anything and left in a hurry. Li Yi stood up from the chair and looked at the pile of glass shards on the floor. The corner of his mouth twitched, and an extremely painful expression appeared on his face. 10,000 taels, impulsive. Fang, hurry up and take these shards back. You can still use them if you burn them. Hearing the commotion, Lao Fang strode into the room. Not long after, a miserable howl came from inside the room. Which D*MN bastard did this? Was it that Wang guy? I knew he wasn't a good person. I'm going to stop him and bring him back to compensate me. Young master. Young master, don't stop me. Forget it. Isn't it just a glass ball? It's fine if it's broken. He's a guest. This is not good. It'll make us look petty. It's worth a lot of money. Forget it. Money comes second. Friendship comes first. Don't let me see him again. Fang wrapped the shards in his coat and walked out of the room, swearing. Inside the room, Li shook his head and sighed. Wang Yong, why is he so careless? He walked out of the room and shouted in a certain direction. Xuanhuan. After a while, a servant girl ran out in a hurry. Have them prepare the carriage. After saying this, Li walked back into the room and carried the largest brocade box into the back hall. Father, we can't do this business. In a deep manner somewhere in the capital, a young man looked at a middle-aged man wearing a Confucian robe and said urgently, if it's like this, when glazed ware becomes common in the future, our Wang family will become the enemy of all the nobles in the capital. The middle-aged man did not answer directly. Instead, he looked at the slightly older young man and asked, Yong, what do you think of this matter? Father, I have a different opinion on this matter. Wang Yong thought for a bit and said, on the way back I kept thinking about this matter. The emperor has just checked the accounts of the Jingdo officials. Any corrupt person has long donated their dirty silver to the national treasury. This matter has just passed. I'm afraid that not many people in court will have the courage to buy this glassware. However, those great clans and nobles will definitely not let go of such an opportunity. Wang Yong continued, the internal strife between the major clans is like fire and water. We only need to inform a small number of families and the Wang family's vassal families. What's there to fear even if we offend the rest? Our Wang family can get 20% of the profit without any investment. What's more, the royal family will also participate in this. On the one hand, we can be firmly tied to County Earl Li. On the other hand, we can work for the royal family. The advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Therefore, I think this is feasible. Ha! The middle-aged man in scholarly robes smiled and patted the shoulder of the young man who spoke first. Do you still remember what the most important thing to remember as a descendant of the Wang family is? Make money. The young man immediately nodded. Remember, as long as the Wang family doesn't rebel, we will always have a foothold in the Jing kingdom. The middle-aged man nodded and changed his tone. What's more, we must be on good terms with that County Earl Li. Yong, I'll leave this matter to you. I understand. Wang Yong said with a solemn expression. All right, don't just wait here. Go do your own things. Wait for me here in 4 hours. Li Yi came down from the carriage with a long brocade box in his arms. He waved to the people around the carriage and turned to walk toward the palace gate. He ran into Chang walking out of the palace gate. Changde was startled to see him and said, the emperor wants to see you. Can you wait a bit? Li Yi gestured at the box in his hand and said, I have to send this to the princess. Changde shook his head and said, go see the emperor first. It won't be too late to see the princess after that. Let's go. Li Yi waved his hand. It just so happened that he had something to discuss with the old emperor. It didn't matter who he saw first or later. In the imperial garden, Emperor Jing watched Master Tan Yin's hand withdraw from his wrist and asked, how is it? Master Tan Yin pondered for a moment and said, Your Majesty, you should try to avoid overwork in the future. Otherwise, the dragon's body won't be optimistic. Emperor Jing was silent for a moment and said, 3 years? I only need 3 years. Can't you do it with your medical skills? Ba. No matter how good your medical skills are, you are still immortal. There is nothing you can do. Master Tan Yin chanted the name of Buddha and said, You can only gain by giving up. If your Majesty can let it go, perhaps you can have 3 years. If I let it go, what's the use of these 3 years? Emperor Jing smiled and said, "Thank you for your hard work, Master. I'll take my leave." Master Tan Yin stood up from the stone bench, retreated to the stone pavilion and turned to leave. Emperor Jing looked into the distance absent-mindedly and his face showed a deep sense of dejection. The two walked on the road in silence. At a certain moment, Changda suddenly asked curiously, "Why didn't Uncle Li ask me why His Majesty summoned you today? If I asked you, would you tell me?" Li glanced at him. How could a psychopath have the face to ask him? Every time he pretended to be confused. Was he addicted to pretending now? When he turned his head, he was a little surprised to see a figure. Li walked over and said, "Master Tan Yin, what a coincidence. I didn't expect to meet you here." The glazed statue of Guanyin that was taken away at noon was sent down in the afternoon. Although half of it was taken by Mississippi Liu on the spot to recruit people, it did not affect Li Yi's good impression of the monk. Amitba. This old monk and young benefactor Li are fated. No matter when, Master Tan Yin always had a faint smile on his face. After that, he looked at Li Yi again and asked, "May I know?" Seeing that Master Tan Yin seemed to want to ask something, Li Yi waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, Master. If there are other Buddha statues and Guanyin statues, I will look for you. I won't sell them to Fahua Temple." Li Yi decided not to cheat the monk. When there was remaining glass, he would give them a palm-sized set of 18 arhats. They were all old friends. He had to make them feel that the 8,000 taels of silver was worth it. "This is not what I mean." Master Tan Yin shook his head and said, "Then what did you want to say just now?" Li Yi looked at him with some doubts. Master Tan Yin thought for a moment and finally shook his head. He said, "Young benefactor Li, you should go quickly. Don't let His Majesty wait too long. I will leave now." After saying that, he walked straight ahead. "This monk is strange." Li Yi shook his head and said inexplicably, "He is a monk, so he is naturally strange." An unfamiliar voice came from the side. Li Yi turned around and saw a Taoist priest in black walking over from behind. He said with a smile, "Greetings, County Uncle Li, Chief Steward Chang. Surnamed Yuan, what are you doing here?" Changda frowned and said with some dissatisfaction. Just now he did not show such an expression to Master Tan Yin, which meant that compared to the monk, Chang obviously disliked the Taoist priest more. Li Yi had already seen the pavilion in front of him. He ignored the two people and walked forward. He let the guard under the pavilion hold the box in his hand and told him to be careful. Before he walked up, Emperor Jing's voice came. "Don't hide it. What good thing did you bring for me this time? Just bring it out." You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.